My work spans a few different disciplines. Most of what I've done up until this point has been in Holocaust studies. I specifically look at the transmission of trauma between Holocaust survivors and their children and their grandchildren.
Okay.
But I also do work on the intersection of Holocaust history, literature, and Christian theology, and how Christian theology, in a number of ways, laid the seedbed for the Holocaust itself.
Hey, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Growing Up Christian. I'm Sam.
And I'm Casey.
And we've had a busy couple weeks, Casey. We're both traveling men these days.
Yeah, on the road.
You are currently in an all-wood room with what looks like to be a stacked washer and dryer combo next to you.
Yeah, that's very observant of you, actually. Yeah, I'm in an Airbnb in Kentucky. I'm drinking bourbon made in Kentucky. It's like millennial inception.
Oh, yeah. What's the name of that bourbon? Can you remember? Or did you just buy something that said Kentucky on it?
Some throwaway $30 bottle. It's
go.
fine.
Yeah. I mean, I'll go through some Jim Beam pretty easily. So I'm not overly concerned with the quality all the time. I mean, I love a good quality bourbon or scotch or something like that, but I'll drink the cheap shit all day. Also, cheap scotch, right? Doesn't normally seem like a thing. I mean, you can obviously like quote unquote. Kirkland, our Costco brand, has like a $15 bottle of scotch, and I would definitely compare it to something like a Jim Beam as far as quality scale. Obviously, it doesn't taste like it because it still has that scotch taste. I don't know that I'd give it to a lot of people, especially people with higher standards or any standards really. But for $15 or whatever it was, maybe it was 18, but still for a handle, I probably drank that too fast. I think, I don't know what the actual time frame was, but it was probably like, that's why scotch, honestly, good price scotch. Like I do enjoy it. I used to buy it more, but it's just so good that I drink too much of it. I'm like, oh, this is great. I'll have another glass. And then I'm like, well, I just spent $80 and it was gone in 5 days. So maybe I'll just hold off on doing that anytime soon.
Dude, I think drinking Kirkland scotch in Kirkland jeans, like while eating a tub of mini eclairs.
I was thinking Kirkland corn dogs. Yeah.
Kirkland corn dogs. Yeah. You know, dinner and dessert.
That Costco brand, dude. That shit slaps. All right. So I was also so I was in New York City this weekend, which is pretty cool. I mean, we took my kids and it was for some reason my daughters had like this like obsession with going to New York. So we were like, we have New York's fucking expensive. I got a hotel for free there because we have I guess it's not necessarily for free, but we have a Marriott card, which makes traveling a lot easier. You just build up points and get free nights at a hotel and stuff. So we had enough points to get 2 nights in New York. So we're like, oh, perfect. I was all on board. I'm like, this won't be an overly costly weekend. And turns out even with even with 2 free nights at a hotel, turns out New York is still actually really expensive after you pay for parking and, your kids get tired of walking. So you have to fucking Uber places or take a cab or whatever. But it's like, but then you go out to eat and everything's twice as expensive. And by the end of it, you're like, well, this like not expensive, quote unquote, free weekend away got very expensive very quickly. So I stopped having as much fun when things start getting expensive because I'm a curmudgeon. And even though I don't really look at our bank account, it bothers the shit out of me when I'm spending too much money.
Well, it takes a lot of money to keep that big city afloat, especially when, you've got 75% of the real estate there owned by Chinese billionaires that pay no property tax.
Yeah, I'm sure that's part of it. We did drive by Trump Plaza at some point. I guess he's probably got a few of them, but I thought that was cool. And it felt like I saw all these trendy looking young people eating outside of it. And I'm like, I mean, at the end of the day, capitalism still rules, I guess, because I bet none of them voted for Trump, but all of them are happy to patronize his plaza.
Yeah. It's like, wow, I've never seen an above ground septic tank before.
I actually, speaking of what you said regarding real estate, have something I do want to get into. But before we touch on anything remotely serious, I have a couple of things that I think are worth talking about. And we'll see
Okay.
how quickly, this is like rapid fire round. We'll see how quickly we get through them. But the first one is what I was most interested to tell you. So I was cleaning out my grandmother passed away a number of months ago. But she has a ton of shit in her house. Like her basement is packed to the gills with stuff. I mean, it's all essentially like trash because the basement is a damp basement. Everything's water damage. Dude, she has Life magazines dating back to like 1952 all the way to like probably the late 90s. But I'm knocking like every issue just stacked in boxes. I think I had to have moved over 1,000 pounds of Life magazines to take them out of the basement.
Old people like keeping paper products, which are consequently like the heaviest thing in the world to move.
Yeah. And dude, if they were in good condition, it would have been sick. I probably would have like tried going through some of them and like found some neat stuff, but all of them were water damaged. Yeah. I bet, dude, a collector probably would have had a fucking field day with those things. I mean, I flipped through some of them and you're like, cool, 1958. Like, let's see what the big news stories were in 1958. And I mean, it's neat when you go through it or even see what the cover of each one was and you go, that was big news in that decade or that year. But like now, nobody's going to talk about it. It's not coming up as relevant at all for anybody. And I think that's what's neat about it is seeing like what was relevant and interesting and on people's radar at the time versus what isn't. And then even still what is, like what kind of political things are happening where you're like, oh yeah, I knew about that. I learned about that. So I don't know. It's really neat to go through them and check out the history. But I think what's even more neat is another magazine that I found while I was there, which that at some point the basement was, I don't know if it was my uncle's bedroom. And that was, look, not zoned for a bedroom. That would not pass today, but it worked then. So basically they just put up wood panel on the walls and threw down a carpet and called it a bedroom. The only exit was a bulkhead on the other side, completely windowless, not even those tiny windows that just let in a little bit of light. So you don't want to kill yourself if you're down there for too long. And there's my grandfather had like hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of records. He loved jazz. Most of them were jazz records, but he probably had a good 300 records. And a lot of them are ruined, broken. They've just been down there for like 30, 40 years. And in the back corner, there's an old record cabinet. And I'm like, so I open it up, I pull some of the records out, some of the vinyl's broken. It's all, again, everything's water damaged and aged down there. It hasn't been touched in so long. And after so I'm trying to get stuff moving to like throw stuff out. And what are we going to try to get rid of and just put it in the dumpster? And what are we going to try to maybe give away? Some people might want the old records. I don't know. I think everything needs to go in a dumpster, but people are having a hard time. Some people have a hard time with just putting everything in a dumpster. So I move this record cabinet and underneath it, I find a June 1980 Penthouse magazine. And it was completely water damaged as well. But I just think what was funny about it is I'm like, 1980 was 42 years ago. So that was, I don't know how, I think my uncle was like 63, maybe 64. So it's possible. I don't think he was still living at home at the time and especially living in the basement, but it's also possible, like my grandfather had that hidden under his record cabinet and maybe he had a record player on top of that cabinet and would go down to quote unquote, listen to music,
I was going to say, turn on some jazz really loud and be like, don't disturb me. I'm meditating.
Yes. I'm getting heavily invested in these jazz tunes and I don't want anyone to
paper
bother.
Mache down here.
Oh, everyone in the family is like, we know not to bother Dad when he's listening to his jazz music.
Dad's personal alone jazz time, okay? Got jazz hands down here. Don't shake them.
My grandfather was a funny guy. Like I knew him as very very quiet, very reserved. He would get upset with us for being too loud when he was watching Jeopardy. So to think of him as like having his private time down there with that one 1980s June catalog, whatever, of Penthouse, I thought it, it kind of humanized him a little. Even if it's not his, I'm pretending like it is, because it's just like, oh, he was just another regular ass guy that I, as like a 7 or 8 year old, I had no clue what it was like to be an adult human at that point in life.
No, is that like hardcore stuff, or is that like a Playboy or something like that?
It's nothing I don't, it's like Playboy. Yeah. I don't actually, I've never looked in a Playboy magazine, to be perfectly honest, because we had the internet by the time I was looking for that kind of content. But I did obviously crack open this magazine. Like, you don't just find that and be like, well, I guess I'll put that back. You're like, what the fuck is going on here? And you're like, but what's interesting about it is it was almost entirely articles. So like that joke of like, I get it for the articles, that guys would say, actually wasn't as irrelevant as I thought. It was like only like look, almost all the pages were like glued together, probably because my grandfather came in between each page, but it you had to like pry it open, and then it would, each page would like leave
It's like licking an
residue on the
envelope.
page before it. Yeah. So
It's like when you're done with it, you just run a line of goo and seal it up.
so I didn't get a full clear picture of what kind of content there was there, but like it seemed like it was directly in the middle of the magazine. There was just some like people doing naked stuff, and then the rest on the before and after that was like, it seemed like it was all articles, and I was like, oh, that's fascinating. And so what I did after I like looked at it to check out what the fuck a Penthouse magazine is, that was the first. I'm fucking 34, and that was the first time I've ever seen a Penthouse magazine. And like I said, I've never seen a Playboy. The whole like nudie mag thing completely missed me in life. Never got to go out into the woods and find some old pervert stash or anything like that. So I just tucked it right back under that record, the record cabinet, and just put it back to where it was. And I was like, I'll let somebody else find this. It made me a little bit sad that I didn't have the kind of family where I could just bring that out and show people what I found. Like, that would have been so much more fun, right? If I had a kind of family that would have found that shit kind of funny, and maybe they would have. It's possible if I wasn't there and they found it, they would laugh about it. But I just don't have the kind of relationship with my family where I'm like, I'm going to bring this out and we'll all have a good laugh. That would have been very uncomfortable for me. And I probably would have just put myself in the dumpster to be taken away.
Yeah. It's like, even if they don't care really,
and they probably
go through all the pageantry of caring.
Yeah. And my uncle and my aunts, and they were around, and I'm like, all of it would just get too uncomfortable. So I just put it back where it was and hope that, my mom or dad or one of my uncles finds it when next time they end up there.
What's like the worst thing to find? Like, within the realm of reason, nothing illegal. What would be like the worst thing, the most embarrassing thing to like come across in your grandpa's Life magazine stash?
Well, before you said nothing illegal, I thought immediately like a box of fingers or something like that. But I don't know, man. I can't think of anything awful to find. Like, I mean, nothing more interesting than a Penthouse magazine. I mean, maybe like a box of strap-ons would have been interesting.
We just started that new Netflix Dahmer series.
Okay, I see where you're going now.
And I don't want to spoil things, but like stumbling across a mannequin torso that had like lip prints all over it, or dried discharge would be upsetting.
Word discharge is more upsetting than like semen. Just saying discharge. I don't love that term.
Seminal fluid.
Perfect. It's more medical. No, discharge is medical.
Something like that, where you just think this isn't the best way for you to express your needs. This is weird. Or like, have you ever seen the the videos of the dudes that wear like the latex lady masks.
Oh yeah, like the full latex suits, kind of, and the get
Yeah.
mask, and you like unzip the mouth or some shit.
Oh no, these ones are like it's like you skinned a Barbie and then slid
Oh,
that over your head. So you kind of look like a sex doll, but there's
oh, that's
eyes cut
terrifying.
out of it. And it's strange. It's a strange way to express whatever that is. There's like whole communities of them that have like these latex um lady suits. I
No
guess it's
way,
not
dude.
hurting
There needs to
anybody or
be a
anything
horror
like that.
movie
It's
like
just
this.
it's unsettling to see.
Why? I don't know why there isn't like a good horror movie where that's the thing that somebody wears to kill people, or like even like a any movie where someone commits like a crime that they know is going to be recorded, where they rob a bank and they put on like old president masks or some shit. Why don't they wear those? I think that would
Yeah,
make it
it's
a little bit more
basically this is
terrifying.
like it's like Leatherface if he skinned a real doll.
Yeah, I mean, I would prefer horror movies to incorporate more creepy shit like that. Dude,
Well, interesting. Yeah, that
uh,
is too bad that you couldn't just bring it up and have fun with it.
yeah. All right. I wasn't exactly rapid fire, but the next thing I'm jumping to is my town. I've talked a good bit about my small town and its goofy quirks and shit like that. But we were supposed to pre-COVID have our like 100th anniversary as a town, and it's I mean, you could if you're having a 100th anniversary celebration of a small town, you can imagine that some of the stuff is just pretty silly. But because we didn't have it, now it's technically like the 102nd anniversary of our town, and they had a whole day, really the whole summer, like had events related to it. But then one day last week, it was a whole bunch of stuff that centered around a full day of extravaganza, and there was a parade, and it was a long parade, too long of a parade. And I hate parades. I'm pretty sure I've talked about hating parades before here, but it was what you'd expect. And okay, so to be clear, I would never go to a parade ever. But the only reason I did is because my wife's grandfather he was like the grand marshal of the parade, and he was riding in the front car. He's a big he's a big name in the town. He taught here for a long time. He coached here. Like he's got a baseball field named after him at my kid's elementary school. Like his name is everybody knows him in this town. He's like the mayor kind of, and it's like so that's cool. Like I was really neat to see like so many people be like excited to see him, and he was awarded like he was given, I forget what it was, but he was basically like given this like there was a softball game that they organized, and he threw out the first pitch for it, and they awarded him with a bat that had stuff engraved on it, and it was just like a nice ceremony for like how much he's given to the town. And but this parade at the very end of it, dude, the local Baptist church here had a float, and that float consisted of their worship team playing worship songs.
Oh, cool. So we had like a mobile generator stage.
Yes, that's what it was. And dude, I don't want to throw shade at like church bands because look, I know it's working on volunteer shit, but that's fine in church. Do you want to put that on a parade? My feeling is no after listening to it. And as they go by, they're singing the song "The Days of Elijah." Do you remember that one?
I don't know.
All right. Well, I wasn't prepared for this, but let's see if I can pull up some of it.
Can you sing it?
No, I don't like to sing, so I won't. Days of Elijah, but the chorus is what I thought was funny, and it got me thinking about a whole bunch of other things. But it's like these are the days of Elijah declaring the word of the Lord, and these are the days of your servant Moses, righteousness being restored. A lot of this is very like Jewish stuff, so it's a lot of like appropriation, like or supersessionism. But what I thought was so funny is like the chorus for it, and I had never really thought much about it, but it's behold he comes riding on the clouds, shining like the sun at the trumpet call. lift your voice, the year of Jubilee. Out of Zion's hills, salvation comes. And I don't know if you recall what Jubilee was, but it was basically this like every 7 years, all debts are forgiven, all slaves are set free. And it's very much in the Bible, the Old Testament, certainly. Sorry, the Hebrew scriptures. And I just find it so funny that Christians sing that song around the globe in Baptist, conservative, Southern Baptist, any sort of church that has more conservative undertones. And here they are singing about this concept of Jubilee, which is complete and total debt forgiveness every 7 years. And 95% of those people would shit their pants over the idea of any level of student loan forgiveness.
Yeah, I think that concept would not fly today at all.
No, it actually didn't fly historically because there's legitimately no historical record of something like that ever happening. It seems unlikely that it ever actually happened. It's possible, but it's very unlikely. So even the people who were like had that in their book were like, yeah, we get it, but like maybe we'll just wait till next year. And they just did that indefinitely forever until we're in the year 2000.
Yeah, well, I like the idea, but I did just loan out some money last year.
Last
So it
week.
seems a little premature. I'm not ready to sign away the obligations here.
Yeah, it sucked for the people who got the calendar wrong and they thought like Jubilee was like just a few days ago, but they had lent people a bunch of money last week and they were just fucked out of their finances straight into servitude. And then they had to wait 7 years to get their life back.
I'm ruined for the Lord.
All right. Do I have anything else? I feel like there was something else that I wanted to talk about. Okay. You decide. So we don't like completely run out of time. Do I jump into a serious topic or do I keep going with stuff that's ridiculous? Let's go. I'm going to drift towards a more serious topic because I keep talking and I think we need to hear more from you.
Thank you for asking me and for hearing my
Yes.
perspective.
Well, you can thank my white male privilege for dominating your white male privilege.
Where is my white male privilege? That's what I want to know.
You don't have it anymore. I took it away from you and I will speak for you now. Go ahead, answer the question. I'll wait.
What was the question?
The original one that you gave me shit for not letting you answer.
I'm lost.
About a series. Are we going in a serious direction and having a conversation about something?
Oh, yes. I think, you know what? I think I'd love to go in a serious direction. Thank you.
Okay. You're welcome.
It's
I'm
nice
glad
to
we're
be
on the same page. Yeah, no, you are not heard. Emphatically not heard. This is what I chose, and you just are going along with it as a sub. All right. So when I was in New York this week, and I thought a lot, you had already joked about the Chinese owning a bunch of housing developments in New York. I assume you have your sources to cite for that, and I'll let you do that later. But
internets, papers, magazines, journalists, bloggers.
No, dude, it was crazy. Like being there, and you look. I mean, all the buildings are obviously very tall, and above the first and second floor is essentially all businesses. But what was crazy is like everywhere we would go, like, and all the reasons anybody goes to New York is you get a hotel and you walk around and you go into stores and you are interested in where you're going. Maybe you go to a bar, maybe you go to a nice restaurant, maybe you go into a Starbucks, for Christ's sake, because they're fucking everywhere. And it's like we went into places we went. There's like a Harry Potter World store that opened up. And that was really cool. And then there's like we went to, I think it's FAO. It's like a famous toy store. I forget what it is. It's FA something.
FAO Schwartz.
Yeah, that's it. FAO. Okay, so I was right. It's FAO Schwartz. And we went there with the kids, and I'm like, holy shit. Every single place we've gone it's all almost entirely people my age working. And you're working at a Starbucks, you're working at FAO Schwartz, you're working at Harry Potter World, it's all retail stores, coffee shops, restaurants. And I'm like, New York pricing and is unbelievable. Like I don't know how anybody affords to live in New York. It costs a shit ton of money to park. And I just found it so I think it really hit me being there, like where you are really like where I live, I don't think the juxtaposition is there quite the same. But in New York, where you're like almost everyone who lives and works here and and faces the public, like a ton of these people all work in places where it's like, I don't know what they get paid. I imagine it's not as good as the people who are working 3 or 4 floors above them in an office that wear a suit and tie to work. And when you look at like the amount of housing and how the developments just like they'll put up like a high rise that'll take up like a an eighth of a block, and they'll build hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of apartments that some rich motherfucker owns that prices out a ton of people, and they just I don't know, man. I was just really blown away by like the amount of like regular ass workers there were versus how impossible it is to live in New York, and how unfair our we've talked a lot about how unfair our economic system is and shit on this podcast, but I don't know, man. It felt like it was slapping me in the face the whole time because it's like
Why I don't get why people live in those places.
it really
That
blew
I
my
think
mind.
there's like a romance to it for sure. I mean, you look at how many TV shows and stuff like that are centered around New York or LA or whatever. I mean, like I feel like half the people we talk to as guests on this show are in LA.
A
I
lot of
guess
them,
if you
yeah.
want to be in the entertainment industry or something like that, I mean, it makes sense that you would live there, but I don't know. I don't get why if you grew up there and that's your home, sure, makes sense. Most of those I think a lot of those people are Long Island and Queens and stuff like that, suburbs that I know the name of and have never been to. But I don't know. I don't get why people try to settle down in those places knowing that they're that crazy expensive.
Yeah.
I just watched this video. I can't remember what publication did it. It's on YouTube, but um, they talked about Billionaires Row, which is like a street in New York that's all like these really tall, really skinny buildings that are just like luxury apartments that sell for crazy astronomical rates. They have broken the most expensive condo, most expensive, housing or whatever rate several times. And like almost all of these things are empty because they're not really useful as a home. They're useful as a place for you to store money, especially, like I said, if you're a billionaire in another country that, needs a safe place to store money for, whenever, that's a great way to do it. I mean, our real estate market climbs and climbs and climbs, and um, it's just a good way to go. There was this video is talking about how the way that New York's property tax assessments are set up, it basically allows builders to continually build these like high end, really expensive housing projects, and for people to purchase those at with like crazy low property tax rates that really don't correlate to the value of the house itself. And I don't know, the whole thing is just strange. And I listen to so many podcasts with comedians, and they go half and half. Half are from LA, half are from New York.
Yeah,
That's
New
kind of the
York's huge for
split, right?
comics. Yep.
And listen to a lot of the New York comics talk about just how New York City is sort of changing and dying in a way because of those factors. Like it's so expensive for
Mhm.
normal people to live there, and people are leaving because it's just hard to make it there. And really, at the end of the day, like, does it have the cultural backbone that it used to that made it worth the price? I mean, people fled LA like crazy, in the pandemic and post pandemic and stuff. I
Yeah.
think partly because you look at how much you pay and property taxes and all of these different things, how much just the cost of anything is higher there. And, when you went through this time period where you really couldn't enjoy any of that, I mean, they had some of the toughest restrictions. You couldn't go outside for time periods. I mean, you couldn't use certain types of, I mean, you couldn't dine, you couldn't do this and that. I think a lot of people just started looking at it and saying, like, this just isn't worth it. Like, the benefit structure is not here anymore for what it costs to be here.
Yeah. And it feels like New York has to be that way, but there's so many people, dude. I mean, you're constantly walking by thousands of people. And I was just shocked, I guess, by like I went like I got right before we left, I went into a coffee shop next to the parking garage where I left my car that weekend. Dude, this coffee shop was there wasn't a single table in there. You walked in and you had like a 3 foot entryway. Like you're like 3 feet between the counter and the door. You're probably 2.5 feet to your right, which is where they kept like cream and sugar and shit like that. And then right in front of you is obviously like the count, like I said, the counter. And then there's three baristas in like this, like, it feels like a 4x4 area in the back. And I'm like, where do they keep where do they keep their anything? Where do they keep fucking literally anything? And I overheard someone go, he came in after me. I overheard, like I was like far away and barely heard it. He was right next to me. Like I had a backpack on and we could barely like get by each other when he was trying to get to the cream and sugar and I was trying to get to the door. We had to like get sideways and suck our stomachs in and try not to touch private parts. And I was like, on my way out, I hear him go, "Is this the same?" They asked him if he had a punch card or something like that for their place, and he was like, "No, I don't think so." He's like, "I feel like I've been here before, but is this the same place I was here like a couple months ago?" And they're like, "No, this is a new place. We just opened." And I'm like, "What the fuck is the turnover rate? Like, when you're getting like a 6x6 square to open another coffee shop? Like, obviously they're roasting their beans somewhere else. They're whatever, like that, whatever their main hub is probably somewhere that's more affordable. But like, what are they doing? Like this, and for this guy to go and then have it be like recently turned over, I'm like, what's the turnover rate for businesses in New York that don't make it? Like,
Oh, it's got to be high.
unbelievable. Like, it's got to be so high. And I don't know, man. There are times where you're like, oh, you hear about living in New York and it seems kind of cool. You walk out your apartment and you walk everywhere or you get on the subway or whatever. But Boston, I guess, is kind of similar, but I feel like Boston is much better. I loved Boston when I lived in it. I love going to Boston. New York is cool, but like it is cool. Like I'm not trying to downplay. It's a neat. I always love the idea of visiting New York. I want to go back. I would love to go with just my wife and like go to neat bars and good restaurants where the kids don't complain about the spaghetti sauce not being good, even though it's obviously better than any place they've ever had spaghetti in their life, and it's fucking spaghetti. Kids love spaghetti, and no, my kids actually love it. We went to an Italian restaurant. We decided to go out to eat to a nice place once, and it was a good place to go for kids because they had like a family style thing. So we just ordered like spaghetti and meatballs, and then we ordered like a half size of something that her and I would like. But it was phenomenal. And it made me want to be like, it makes me want to go with Jill just to like enjoy New York City as an adult. Cause I mean, hands down, they probably have some of the best food you've ever had anywhere. You know what I mean? And, but then the people working in these restaurants where you're getting the best food you've ever had, like restaurant, dude, make like doing food service and whatever is like, that's a tough industry to make it in. And there's thousands of restaurants in New York. So wherever you're going, it's like people go to the place in their area. But if you don't, like, you as an individual, if you live there, couldn't go to every place. You couldn't try out all the restaurants in New York. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, it's so much from what I've heard. And I think that's part of the appeal too, is just there's so many things there and so many, you know,
Yeah.
I don't know. I feel moving to Wichita from, like that Flint and surrounding area of Michigan, we didn't have much for local restaurants and stuff like that there. And even moving to Wichita, I'm like, man, it's like overwhelming how many different restaurants there are here. And I don't know how you'd ever try all of these. I can't imagine in a place like that where you actually have like a decent sized population, to pick from.
Yeah. Dude, I think what struck me going to all these places is that working a customer facing job in New York is not easy. And I have a salary job at a corporate office, and I do I do well for my area. I do okay. Uh, once I shift into a school system, I'm going to take a pay cut, and that's going to be really tough. But like for what I do and where I live, I do okay. And I'm thinking about all these jobs that I watch people do where I'm like, there's no fucking chance that I want to do any of these jobs. I honestly think working in a Starbucks in New York and having there was this it was a bagel shop, dude. There was this bagel shop down the street from the hotel I was staying in, line out the door for at least 6 hours. You wake up in the morning and maybe that's an exaggeration, but I woke up, we went out to breakfast with the kids. When we left, there was still a line out the door. That I could see the bagel shop from where we were eating breakfast, and the line never got smaller. And I'm like, you're that that is awful. I would never want to work that. I think what I do isn't as hard as doing a customer facing job in New York where you have people who hate standing in line, have somewhere to go, are in a rush. And it's like a busy ass city, dude. Everyone needs to be somewhere and thinks that they're more important than everyone else and that they're the only person on the planet running late. And I'm like, those jobs suck. They're not easy. And I and all these, like, you think about all these corporations that own them, or these corporations that own the real estate that they're in, or own the real estate that people rent, and you just think about how like the average individual is just constantly, continuously fucked over because they don't put on a tie and go to the office 2 stories up while they're serving these office people this stuff and getting berated by them. I don't know, man. I just really like, there's such a serious juxtaposition in New York where you don't get to like, it's hard to partition those two things. You don't get to just go about your business and be like, okay, people who work at McDonald's don't deserve as much as me because they don't work as hard or care as much, or anyone can do it. But I don't honestly think that's the case in a lot of places. I just am like, it
I
seems
guess.
unfair.
What are you gonna do? That I mean, not all jobs are fulfilling. Not all work is like everyone's passion to do. There's jobs out there that are just jobs, and some people just want to go do a job and then go home and do what they really love. I mean, that's I don't know.
But I think my
What
point
is
is
there
that
to say about it? I mean, it's like there. I think those are a lot of those jobs are temporary jobs for people who are on their way to something that they really find fulfilling. I think where the problem is like, okay, yeah, not everybody gets to do something that's like their passion at all times. How do we make sure that like they're making enough money to survive? Like, we need people to do those jobs. We need people to work at the bagel shop, right? So how do we make sure that we're making life at least somewhat comfortable for the person who does work at the bagel shop dealing with customers on a day-to-day basis?
right. I mean, I think that's my ultimate point here is like, that you can do these jobs in the city and just like basically be destitute is like what I found so infuriating, because it's not even always like a one stop. Oh, this is my stop. This is one stop to get to where I want to go. It's like you're like in your 30s or 40s or 50s, and these are the jobs that are available because there's more people in New York than there probably is jobs, or jobs that you
Yeah,
might want.
maybe.
Like, I don't know, man. I'm just like, I just found it very eye opening in the way that you're like, people have to do these jobs. Everyone who works in the corporate offices that show up and depend on their coffee or their bagels or whatever. Like, I think what I found so frustrating is like when you think about the wages people make and how people will like just kind of demean entry level positions like that because oh, I guess anyone can get them. Sometimes that's like all anyone can get. Maybe people like doing it too. That's also fine. But either way, when you look at the amount of money that's wrapped up in a city like that and how like it's just the imbalance of like, it's not hard to funnel and sink a little bit more money into these first and second floor businesses or into the people who manage them or run them or make sure that they can even exist. So that way the people who work on the next 12 to 23 floors can like keep doing their shit in New York. Because if any of those first couple, like, I mean, if any of those like first and second story businesses just stop existing there, like New York culture also dies. People don't go want to live there, work there, put on that suit and go to the 45th floor of some stupid fucking sky rise. Like, I don't know, man. New York is just so bizarre. I found that I've been there before, but for some reason, something about it stuck out to me this time as particularly bizarre in the way that it, in a small landscape, everyone is like, you could have like low income housing, and then like the next block at the, you could have this skyscraper and the top floor is like this penthouse suite, and it's strange. That's all. It's like, it's just, it
I think
feels
it's
like,
headed for a correction. I mean, ultimately, like, I think that's what we're starting to see with some of these, areas where it's become so hard to exist unless you make a certain amount and stuff like that. Is, I think it's heading for a correction. The thing that bothers me is just that, now we see all of these like corporate entities and financial firms and stuff like that that are making it impossible for people to live other places, places that
yeah,
aren't cultural hubs, by buying up real estate and stuff like that, like BlackRock and some of these companies that are buying up all of the, residential real estate and stuff. That's the stuff that I think is just ultimately like the most sinister. Is like your option if you're in a place like New York or something and you're finding it just impossible. It's so hard to live that it's taking the joy out of living there.
yeah,
Your option to move is made that much harder by the fact that, like, an equity fund comes in and buys up 70% of the mortgages that are available on residential real estate in a place like Wichita, or Omaha, Nebraska, or Louisville, Kentucky, or you name it. Any of these smaller cities in the Sunshine Belt and stuff that are hotspots right now. I mean, I have a friend that lives in Phoenix, and moved there, years ago with the intent to like save up and buy a house and stuff. And right now, if you look at numbers, I mean, Phoenix is one of the most out of sync markets in the United States. I mean, the real estate market is astronomical. Inflation is heavy there, and a lot of that has to do with the fact that, like, big equity firms are buying up a lot of the available housings that's there. So you're taking away the option of people who are even willing to like leave those hotspot areas
for
and move
sure.
to someplace more affordable. And that is completely unsustainable. And this is
Yeah,
going to bite us. This is going to lead to like real pain across the country unless we do something to regulate this. I mean, they should not be able to come in and buy it. This is like the last possible way for normal people to build some sort of wealth throughout their lifetime.
yeah,
It's home ownership. And the fact that they're taking that away from average people who are, working these middle class jobs that we need those people. We need the person who's willing to work at the bagel shop, and maybe he's not going to make as money as like a real estate developer or something like that. But, that the dream that existed, that like, well, you work hard, you save your money, you buy a house, you can send your kids to college, like all of that is at threat because of how we've allowed these like equity firms and stuff like that. And some of these, I mean, college is a whole nother topic, but the way that the cost structure is totally out of control because of those things is, it's upsetting, and it's gonna bite us.
yeah,
Like, those are things that are going to lead to real malcontent and stuff across the country. And I don't know. I mean, that's one of those depressing issues where you're like, I don't see a way out of this, because who in the world is going to stand up to these people?
yeah. I know. And housing, it's like there's not enough housing for people who need it. It's like, so the option is, I guess, to build, but you can't build in a city, so you got to go somewhere else. But also, building materials are an all time high. So once again, we end a conversation with everything's terrible and it's not going to get better. I think
let
that's
me let me
general.
let me lift the spirits a little bit, okay? Because I am in Kentucky right now, and I went to an amazing store that I loved called Rural King. You ever been to a Rural King?
I've never heard of a Rural King.
Me neither. But they had a number of really fun t-shirts, hats, and socks for sale that I thought were a lot of fun. Can I read you some of these?
Yep, let's hear them.
Okay, so this was an entire rack of socks that I thought were really fun. So this first pair, this is their cow spot pattern, right? And it says "Move Mountains" with 3 O's. Matthew 17:20.
Beautiful.
That's in the Bible, right?
Matthew is yeah, he's in the Bible.
Matthew's a Bible guy.
Yeah.
Okay,
Cows
well, shout
are
out
also in the
Matthew if
Bible,
you're
so that's
listening.
dope.
This one has little avocados all over
Okay.
it. It says Jesus guacs my world.
Okay, I love it. I need those socks,
That's
dude.
fun. People love avocados. Even Christians like avocados.
That's one thing that Christians and like really any variation of Christian and millennial can get on board with is avocados, man. Avocado toast, that's just blowing up.
Avocados are the new bacon.
They are, and they are priced like it too.
These ones have horses on them, little ponies and hearts, and they say, "Love your neighbor."
Hey,
Mark 12:31.
all Bible socks.
Yeah, this one's got little pigs on there. It says "Hog wild for Jesus." 1 John 4:9.
Hog wild, that's good. Ball hog wild for Jesus.
Yeah. Bog. This one has llamas on it, and it says "No problema. God is in control."
Dude, who makes this shit?
It's a company called Bless My Soul, SOLE.
Okay, I saw that coming.
Got a cactus pear that says "Stick with Jesus." Oh, this one's fun.
It doesn't say Jesus was my prick.
I would have bought a pair if it would have said that. Jesus is my prick. This one says "What a friend we have in Jesus," but it's the Friends logo.
Okay,
Because
that's
Friends is a TV show that's popular. It's kind of like family friendly in a way.
Yeah. I hope they get sued.
There's some
for
light
stealing
sexual humor. You may want to talk to your pastor before you let your kids watch it. But Jesus makes me a happy camper. It says little campers on it. And then there was a number of different T-shirts that were really fun. One has like a pioneer man with a gun, and it says "God, family, firearms, and freedom." Now that doesn't have a scriptural reference underneath it, but I think it's kind of like because you could quote the whole Bible. How do you pick one?
What part of the Bible doesn't address that?
This one is like a parts diagram of a Colt 1911, which is a real popular pistol. And it says, "The anatomy of my rights."
That's cool. I mean, your rights are the entirety of a disassembled firearm. Okay.
Yeah. You wouldn't have rights unless you had the right to shoot at someone's head.
Right. Okay.
This one looks like a Heinz logo, and it says, "May your light shine for Jesus. Spread it around." Matthew 5:16. Mayo, that's MAYO.
Yeah, like mayonnaise.
Like mayonnaise. Yeah, so there was a whole bunch of them that were really fun. I liked this one a lot. It said it's Bravo Lima Echo Sierra Sierra Echo Delta, which spells out the acronym for blessed.
Dude, that is so dumb. Is that like
It hurts. It's so bad it hurts.
Is that like what you say over a walkie-talkie?
Yeah, I think so.
Alpha Bravo Delta Beta Gamma?
Yeah, something along those lines.
Alpha Bravo 1, this is Alpha
Whiskey
Bravo
Tango
2.
Foxtrot.
Are you picking up Alpha Bravo 1? This is I repeat, this is Alpha Bravo 2. We have a Delta Beta Gamma insight. Is that how they do it?
Yeah, I think so.
Perfect.
I mean, I feel like you're kind of stealing valor right now, but
Dude, it's not
something along those
stolen. I'm
lines.
blessed with that shit. I didn't steal anything.
The only one that I bought was it says Buck Fever, and it has a cowboy riding a deer. I thought that was kind of fun. I
I
bought a
like that you
medium
bought it.
though, and it says
Oh,
pre-shrunk cotton, but like it's pretty tight in the bust. I'm a busty boy.
yeah. I think
It's a little
I had
tight.
at one point posted on Instagram a joke about how it was you holding up a shirt, and I said the only joke here is that Casey thinks it's a medium. So it turns out I'm right.
You're right.
For the record,
I
I
know. I
wanted
am
to
buying more larges now because I have to start buying shirts that don't fit like a sports bra.
You're like the fucking kid from Recess who the bard who has his shirt. Doesn't he have his shirt up over his tummy sometimes? No, maybe not. Am I thinking about that wrong?
Oh man, I can't remember who it is. I know who you're talking about, but I
You know
can't
what I'm thinking
remember.
of? I'm thinking of Harold from Hey Arnold.
Okay. Okay.
He's-
Oh yeah, he was the bully, right?
yeah, I think his shirt sticks up over his tummy.
I'm like a tiny him.
I also like that you bought it because we've also previously talked about how you can't go to any rest stop, truck stop, convenience store without buying something. So you're continuing to prove that right as well.
It's just courteous, you know. Like if I'm gonna go in and clog the
Clog
toilet
the
at
toilet.
your gas station, like I should at least buy something from the Quick Trip Corporation, you know. It's just good manners.
Oh my god. Well, we've got a little long here. It's when we get to this point, I'm like, do we just keep going and make this an entire episode, or do we just decide to cut it short? Not cut it short,
We
cut it long and introduce
we
it.
cut it long.
Cut it long.
And if you've been listening to this podcast for a little while, you'll be excited to hear that our guest this week is, well, it used to be Luke Wilson, and now it's Dr. Luke Wilson.
Whoop, whoop.
Yeah, so our buddy Luke finished his doctorate. He is officially a doctor, and he joins
And
us
we
this
let him
week to
inspect our
talk about.
genitals. Oh, not that kind of doctor. I think he pulled a fast one on us.
Right. So he joins us this week to talk about his field of study, which is Holocaust studies. And specifically, you know, we talk a lot about how Christianity and Christian culture contributed to the mentality that led to the Holocaust. And I realized, like, for some of you, that may sound crazy or far fetched or something like that, and it's not. It's a really interesting discussion. There might be parts of it that you disagree with, but I think in the end you'll find that there's definitely some really interesting points here. And of course, it's Luke Wilson. Like if you walk away from this conversation mad, what's wrong with you? You need to lighten up.
And
The problem's not
Oh,
you. The problem's not Luke. It's you.
exactly. Amazing. No, Luke is the best. We
Amazing.
fucking love him. We talk about him all the time. He's one of our favorite people on the planet. I'm thankful that we have such a wonderful friend of the show who's always willing to come on and hang out with us and chat. And I think you're all going to really enjoy this conversation where I, at least one or two times, probably put my foot in my mouth because I sometimes talk about how I know things and I don't. And smart people who have a capital D, lowercase r, period in front of their name get to tell me why I'm wrong. So it's
And nobody does it more gracefully than Dr. Luke Wilson.
Yep.
So if you are enjoying the podcast, share it with a friend. Leave us a 5-star review wherever you listen to podcasts, unless, of course, there's the option to leave more stars. Then give us the highest stars. Just all the stars. It doesn't cost you anything to give us stars. Give them to us. And if you want to get in on the conversation, join our Discord. You can find the link on our social media, and if it's not there for some reason because of oversight or laziness, message us and we'll get it to you. And with all that being said, enjoy our conversation with Dr. Luke Wilson.
Hey, everybody. We are back with our guest. Very excited. Dr. Luke Wilson. We can call you the doctor now.
Doctor?
Thank you for having me, gentlemen. It's always a pleasure to be back on this darn show.
It's always a pleasure to have you here. So, right before we hit record here and jump back into this, we were talking off air about I can't believe I did. We had to look it up because it was hard. Despite going to Liberty University, it was hard for me to believe that they actually have a Constitution Week. It's like Shark Week, but shittier. So what the fuck was Constitution? Before we talk about you and your life and all of your awesome accomplishments that you have recently accomplished, this is why you're a doctor and I'm not. What I don't know if they did Constitution Week when I was there. They must have, but what was that? What was it?
Yeah, so Constitution Week was at least when I was there, it was this week where they invited a bunch of speakers, mostly politicians. I remember one guy, I think he was like the former governor of Ohio. And he would always be there every time they had
everyone's favorite speaker.
Yeah, that guy. And so we would have to sit through, instead of chapel, we would have, these politicians come and speak. And it was essentially just like, let's pump America's tires week. And they would come in and just like say all these things. And I remember one guy specifically, this is the guy, the governor or whatever, former governor of Ohio. He came in and he starts going on about all these different things that America has done and all these things that America, invented or, was the first for. And so I remember
Did he talk about the cotton gin? Because that probably
Eli Whitney, baby. And no, he says, he probably did. But the things that stuck out to me as a Canadian were things that weren't invented or done first in America. And I'm sitting there and he's like, and the telephone invented by an American. I was like, no, the telephone was invented by Alexander Graham Bell, who was Scottish, who lived in Ontario, Canada. Like, give me a break. Bob, or whatever his name was, Bob Good. I think his name was Bob Goodlap, but I don't think that's right.
Dude, the indoctrination must be pretty heavy because I think I may have also thought the telephone was invented in the United States.
Well, maybe you heard it during Constitution Week, like maybe that's where you quote unquote learned that. But so what happened was like, there were a bunch of us Canadians who like, we all kind of looked at each other because like, this is something that in Canada, like we only have a few things, like give us our things. Please don't take those from us. The things we invented, right? There's like, we're just a small people. We're a humble folk. And so we're all looking at each other. We're like, no, like we all know that. Like we learned that in like grade 2 kind of thing. Right. And so afterwards we all get together and all like, what the heck was that? What the heck was that? And so we're like, let's go talk to him. So one of these Constitution Weeks, we marched down in the Vine Center, which was the basketball stadium in which they held Convocation Chapel. We walked down to the front and, people are like shaking this guy's hand. Like all these like Americans are like, loving this guy. And so we go down and we're like, hi, sir. Like, whatever, like we obviously heard what you said. We just want to let you know that an American or America did not invent the telephone. And he's like, well, history is kind of a funny thing. And there's a lot of interpretation. We're like,
oh my God.
There's no interpretation here. Like, this is a matter of fact, sir. Like, what in the world are you talking? Anyway, long story short, we had fun with it. We really enjoyed our time as an international students at Constitution Week.
The irony of that response is if you were talking about the Bible, your positions would have flipped completely.
Right.
Like,
yeah.
No ambiguity there.
There's no interpretation for evangelicals. That's all the rest of the world, right? They're the ones with interpretation.
That's so fun. Oh, it's up to interpretation. See, I mean, he was Canadian, but like also that's like American. And then there's,
right.
Scotland. We have Scottish people. So when you look at it that way, it's like it was invented in America by an
probably
American.
More like he invented it and then an American bought the patent for like pennies on the dollar. And part of the deal was that you can't talk about how he invented it anymore.
That was also the invention of NDAs, surprisingly.
Yeah. All in all, a good
funny.
time. And I just look back and I think to myself, like, imagine having a student population where like 1/10 of your student population are international, right? Like 1 in 10. And I'm not saying that's the majority. Obviously, it's the minority. It's a fraction. of the overall student population. But like friends, liberty, like what in the world are you thinking? Like know your audience, or at least part of your audience. I don't know. To me, I just to this day it's still kind of mind-boggling. But who am I?
So the place where I work, it's not sinister or anything like that in any sort of way, but they say a prayer and the Pledge of Allegiance at like every meeting. That's how we start every meeting, and it's awkward when it's like it's an international event, so you have people from like all over the world in this room, and they're all kind of like standing there. They look uncomfortable. Sometimes they'll play the national anthem, and it's just, yeah, it seems so weird in the with that audience. It just doesn't make sense.
Casey, do you ever remain seated?
Do I?
Yeah.
No, because
No.
I want to go to heaven.
Right. Also
He
known as
stands-
not getting fired.
He stands for the flag and kneels for the cross, Luke.
Absolutely.
You know what? God bless the USA. That's all I have to say.
Yeah. Oh my God. Well, I'm glad we started off there because I can't believe Constitution Week did not. I don't imagine they stopped it. It sounds like it's still going. You just looked it up. It's still a thing. So I don't know how I missed that. I was still pretty patriotic at that time. So shame on me, I guess. But Luke, we wanted to talk to you just because we love you, but we also wanted to talk to you about your accomplishments. You're a doctor now, and that's really cool. And we don't know anything about your doctorate or what you studied. And we've had you on to talk about gay stuff and made you the token gay guy. And I figure we can give you a shot at being a person on this podcast.
No, I'm nothing more than my sexuality. How dare you try to humanize me?
But
yeah. Luke Wilson, author of the controversial doctoral thesis, Baby in the Bathwater, Why Eugenics Gets a Bad Rap. Am I off? Is that okay?
That's like what I would have written if I had been at. Although you know what, we did learn in contemporary issues, our contemporary issues classes about eugenics. Slash, what was it? Never mind. That's a different story. It was about euthanasia. We learned about eugenics, didn't we?
Yeah, I definitely think we did.
Yeah,
it
I'm
wasn't
sure we
all
did.
bad. No, I don't remember if they said anything like that. But
I think
The
they were
silver
pretty
linings, they
solidly
talked about-
against eugenics.
it was
Oh,
like
you're right.
week
right.
12, the silver linings of eugenics. You're like, okay.
Well, Lynchburg actually had like a pretty like a rocky history with eugenics, because there was like they had a like a sanitarium there or something like that, and they euthanized like I'm pulling this out of the archives here, but I think it was several thousand people at this sanatorium.
What?
Or not euthanized, I'm sorry, sterilized.
Sterilite. Okay.
Euthanized is a lot different, yeah.
You know what? I was going to say, with a name like Lynchburg, are we actually that surprised by this? But even with sterilized, I mean, this sounds, right in line with what I would have expected, actually.
I mean, history is a funny thing in that way,
Yeah.
It's a little ambiguous. No, but I got to read one of your papers that you wrote, talking about like the role of Christianity and the doctrine that kind of played into the general attitude that led to the Holocaust. I'm fascinated by this topic. I don't feel like I've ever really heard this angle on the Holocaust or on that like German nationalism front. So yeah, tell us a little bit about it. I'm curious to hear what your thoughts are on it.
So no, my work spans a few different disciplines. Most of what I've done up until this point has been in Holocaust studies. I specifically look at the transmission of trauma between Holocaust survivors and their children and their grandchildren.
Okay.
But I also do work on the intersection of Holocaust history, literature, and Christian theology, and how Christian theology, in a number of ways, laid the seedbed for the Holocaust itself. I also do work on evangelicalism, which is not to say that I'm an evangelical. It's quite the opposite. Instead, I look at evangelicals and talk about how they form their moral communities and how they cohere in certain spaces. But that's actually going to be my next project. But I digress. To answer your question, Casey, the work that you read and the work that I've done up until this point on the history of the Holocaust, and again how Christianity influenced that, um, really started when I was in div school. I remember for the first time I heard people talking about, and then also in my classes, about how Christianity was the fertile ground from which the Holocaust sprung. And it's not to say that the Holocaust, was a monocausal, or there was like one sort of like thing that led to the Holocaust, i.e., Christianity. No,
Mhm.
obviously there were a number of other things. There were economic factors, there were political factors, there were, sort of like German mythopoeia and how that influenced, the Aryan race, what people thought about as this like sort of pure folk. And so, but all that to say that Christianity certainly shaped and influenced what ultimately happened. And I would argue ultimately that without Christianity, anti-Semitism and also the Holocaust by extension would never be what it is, had it not been for what was written in the Christian scriptures, specifically the New Testament, the Gospels, and then also Paul's letters. And then on top of that, later early church fathers and how they talked about Jews because of what they were reading in scripture. Without Christianity, again, anti-Semitism and the Holocaust wouldn't ever have been what it was or what it is, because that was in a lot of ways the intellectual, if we can call it intellectual, sort of influence behind what we think about when we think about Jews, or when we think about stereotypes about Jews. And so, if you think about like really any stereotype about Jews, so this is what I do in my classes when I teach. I'll say, like, I'll ask students, like, for instance, when we talk about gender, I'll say, give me the stereotypes of gender. Like, what do we think is a stereotypical understanding of masculinity or femininity? And that, all the students are nervous to say, like, what? Like, I don't know. And they're like, I don't think this. I'm not asking you if you think this. I'm just asking you what are the stereotypes.
Yeah,
If we
yeah.
think about, for Jews, what are the stereotypes? I mean, you can spitball a number of different stereotypes about Jews. And if you think about all of them, the vast, vast, vast majority find their genesis in the Gospels themselves, right? We can think about specifically the Gospel of John, which is arguably the most beautifully written gospel, but it's also by far the most anti-Semitic, right? And you can think about different verses where even just the very phrase "the Jews," right? If we apply the word "the," which is the definite article "the," before a certain group, oftentimes it's a totalizing sort of move. It's a totalizing gesture, right? And if you think about it being the definite article, it's ultimately shaping or framing a specific group in a definite sense, right? So like
It's making
the
them a
Jew,
monolith.
right? It's like saying the blacks or the gays. Like we don't use that language. However, to this day, we still think about, or we still say the Jews, right? And if you walk up and down the street in any American town, or even Canadian, if in fact Canadians know what the Gospels are, anything about Jesus, which 99% of them, I swear at this point, just don't. But putting that aside, if you go up to people in America and you say, "Who killed Jesus?" What are folks going to say?
Usually the Jews.
Jews.
Jews, right? And again, we're still using that definite article.
Yeah.
And so if you think about that, you start to realize how sort of imbued anti-Semitism is in our just sort of like, what's the word, cultural consciousness or cultural imagination, maybe more accurately, because this is imaginative, even if you look at the scriptures themselves, right? It wasn't the quote unquote Jews, or quote, the Jews, end quote. It was the Roman Empire, right? Like it was
Right.
And I feel like you do get a mix of those responses depending on what people are talking about, but it's not uncommon, and it definitely, even if there has been some language shift around, like it could change between the evangelical group that you're part of. I don't feel like my personal experience growing up was a lot of the Jews killed Jesus. I remember having conversations with my parents about anti-Semitism, especially when you learn about the Holocaust and like, where does this come from? And then you learn about people like Martin Luther and all the horrific things he said and called for. I mean, he called for straight up violence against them. And it's like, I remember like you talking about this is kind of, I'm spitting this out as I think about it, but it's actually making me remember a conversation that I had with my mom, which is like, oh yeah, some Christians like think that, the Jews killed Jesus, or that's where some anti-Semitic stuff comes from. But It wasn't, and she kind of would say that it was that it's the Roman Empire. It wasn't, and also, that was his whole point was coming to die, and of course, I believed that at the time too. But it is interesting because there was still that, even though like you try to like skirt around it, it was still like everyone who's trying to say that it's wrong to be anti-Semitic, because even Jesus was a Jew, so you can't not like the Jew. But then it goes, but it's so common, like everyone knows it, and once you kind of know that, and when it's that much a part of it, where it's your immediate talking point to explain it away, it shows you how embedded it is in the culture, and even as an attempt to get away from it, you're probably still making associations that you're unaware of.
And even this idea, because I think you're right. There are so many evangelicals like Jerry Falwell, our good pal, who were philo-Semites, right? These are folks who love Jews, whatever that means. And then on top of that, like are very much pro-Israel, which of course Israel and all of Judaism and also all Jews are not isomorphic. They're not all the same. They're connected. Obviously, they're deeply.
He's more like pro Netanyahu.
Sure. Right? And so if we think about this idea of philo-Semitism, if we even say like, let's even put away like Christian Zionists and all those wild folks.
Hey, before you go into that, just for anyone listening, do you want to do a quick definition of Zionism between Zionists and philo-Semites? I think is what you said.
Yeah. So Zionists are people who think that like they're essentially trying to restore, how do you say,
Israel?
Well, they're trying to, it's very much like pro-Israel, right? Mm-hmm. And it's very much trying to create this like Jewish nation. And of course, like Israel has been created and it's there. But it's this very much like pro-Israel stance. And then philo-Semitism is the idea of loving Jews, right? And so to be philo-Semitic, philo, love, Semite, in this case, like it means actually a whole group of people, but we're specifically talking about Jews oftentimes. Philo-Semites, so the people who love Jews. And if you think about philo-Semitism specifically, and you're thinking about, the idea of like saying, I love an entire group of people. Like, what does that mean? Like, would I say ever that I it's like when people say I have a heart for Africa. You're like, what the heck are you talking about?
Don't say that, please. Thank you.
You have a love for an entire continent. A, have you been there, right? B, can you name me 7 or 10 countries in Africa? Probably not. And then on top of that, like, what do you mean?
Because there's only 9.
Yeah, gotcha. And then on top of that, to say like you love an entire group of people, it's like you don't. Like if you met all of them, you probably wouldn't love them all. Like there's some people you just like. Again, like you love an idea of people, and I think that's what philo-Semitism is. It's loving the idea of a group of people, and this is so central to the evangelical imagination. They don't love people; they love the idea of people, which of course is an incredibly dehumanizing way of approaching any group of people. Right? Saying, I love this entire group of people. And I think what's so scary about philo-Semitism is that if you can love a group of people so easily, right, without really any context or condition, you can all really hate that group really easily as well. And that's what we find throughout Christian history, right? Because if you think about Martin Luther, and Sam, you brought up Martin Luther, this guy, he said he loved Jews for a long time, and he loved to engage with different Jews in the time in which he was living. However, by the end of Martin Luther's life, some people say it was because of a certain, disease or whatever that he changed his mind, which like, I don't think so. I think he was also
syphilis.
The good old syphilis. No, it's like the idea that they never converted. And so finally he was like, I'm frustrated with this group of people, right? Not individuals. And then said they're homogenized, totalized into this entire monolithic group. He turned on the Jewish community, right? And he has that treatise, and it's literally titled "On the Jews and Their Lies." That's the name of the treatise, right? And if you've ever read it, it's just unbelievable to read because you're like, oh my gosh, number of like animal comparisons that he makes between Jews and pick your animal. It's like, holy guacamole! Like this guy hated.
It's hard to stomach what he
like.
Writes.
Hey, Marty, this is a little on the nose, bud.
Marty, have you? And I think so. I think all of this to say, it's like when you're so able to love a group of people so easily, you're also so able to hate a group of people so easily.
Especially when they don't fit that mold of what it is that you quote unquote love about them, right?
So I think this whole like concept is fascinating because I very much grew up in that like philo-Semitism realm, and it wasn't something that we really like examined. It was just this weird like Christian belief that you had to support Israel, quote unquote, because they'll what was it, a passage that was like, I'll bless them that bless thee and curse them that curse thee, or something along those lines. And like, what was weird about it, there's several things. One, I feel like in my life I've known almost no Jewish people. And certainly before I left, my little town in Michigan, like there was no Jewish community to speak of in my town that I lived in. I've spent very little time with Jewish people. So it's weird to have like these ideals about a people group that you really have no experience with or anything like that. The other weird thing about it, the flip side of it, is it totally colors the way that you look at that entire part of the world, because the flip side of being like philo-Semitic and supporting Israel, whatever that means, which basically comes down to like you have to rubber stamp everything that the Israeli government does, right? The flip side of that is that it turns the Islamic world into the enemy. And for and maybe not in every context, but like in the context of it that I grew up in, like
Yeah.
I heard so many explanations that were like, look, here's the thing, man. The entire Middle East is Islamic, and you've got this one tiny little strip that is democratic and that supports human rights and blah 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 blah. That was the interpretation that we were given it with. And again, just looking at how many countries and how many millions of people as a monolith, is like, well, they're all Muslims, so you know they need to be pushed out of this whole section of the world, and you get the idea.
Yeah. And no, I think he said that you bring up like an incredibly important point. Like how many evangelicals know, or not just know, but are friends and maybe even good friends with Jews, right? Like with Jewish folks. I The number is quite small, right? Like, and I think that when you again love an entire group of people blindly, you're able to again really you think about them, you don't know them, right? Like you imagine who they are, you tell, and also this whole like sort of myth of the Judeo-Christian foundation of the US. Like this is a myth, just like Jews, and the way that Jews are framed in the Christian imagination are mythical, right? Like they're not real. There's no such thing as a Judeo-Christian narrative. Like no, there's a Christian narrative that Christians, evangelicals are like, hey, Jews, you're part of us, right? And then people like Ben Stein are like, yeah, we are. And then the rest of them are like, no. And somehow they get roped in. They're like, we don't want to be a part of this. Like, leave us alone. Like, ask most Jews. They're like, no, it's not Judeo-Christian. It's Christian. And it just so happens that our holy book is the foundation for yours. And that's really all
Yeah.
that is Jewish in this sense. But and to your second point, and I didn't define Christian Zionism well. I was more so focused on Christian philo-Semitism. Christian Zionism, right? Like Christian Zionism is really like a love of Israel, and specifically a desire to return the Jewish people, back to the land of Israel, right? Like
Because we don't want them here, right? That's the subtext. I
well,
love
you know
Jews,
what?
but over there, I like them more over there.
They should have their own country and get out of Western Russia. I think that was part of the motivation at the time.
But you know what? I think that I've never thought about that, but you're absolutely probably onto something, right? Like I think there's got to be something there. But I think that what's damaging about all of what we're talking about is really when we're talking about a group of people, but we don't know that group of people. When we theorize, and of course, theology at the end of the day is theory. When we're theologizing or theorizing about people, but not actually like engaging with flesh and blood individuals, we're thinking about these people as abstract concepts, right? Even where there is the verse that says like until all Jews are returned to Israel, Jesus won't come back, right? Or no, pardon me, until all Jews, what is it? Not returned to Israel, sorry. That all Jews like profess the name of Jesus as Lord and Savior, then Jesus, it's not until then that Jesus will come back. So really, these are people who are pawns in this like unfolding quote unquote divine drama where it's like Christians are like, we got to get them to know Jesus because until then we're not going to be able to go to heaven, or the rapture's not going to, right? And whether or not they're thinking like a number of things, whatever. All this to say is that in that case as well, like all of what we've been talking about, Jews are not seen as people; they're seen as pawns. They're seen as abstract ideas. They're seen as not really people, which of course is never okay.
Yeah. Well, what's like super fascinating about what you're saying is the whole them being pawns again is it's subtext. It's like I would never have thought that that's the message I was getting, but then you look at the way that a lot of evangelical communities respond to with such exuberance towards what they would I don't know if who gives them the name, but quote unquote messianic Jews, right? They're like it's like better than Christian. It's like, oh shit, that double whammy's coming in strong. You're gonna get that extra jewel in your crown. And we knew it. I remember the first family I met who was they were a Jewish family, but also Christian, but they didn't go to church. They still went to temple, but were still part of the Jewish community. And that's actually not like really depending on how you do it, as long as you're not like taking that shift into evangelicalism or being Ben Stein about it. That's not a taboo thing. You can, no one really cares. Um,
Well,
sort of.
yeah, like Messianic Jews or Jews for Jesus is those that was the brand that I
Yeah.
knew. Um, they a lot of Jews don't like them. A
Okay.
lot of Jews are like
So
they're not
I'm
Jews. Like, what
very
does that
wrong.
mean to be a Jew and to be a Christian? Like, they're not necessarily like in a lot of folks' understanding of Judaism, they're not compatible. Um, Again, like if they're doing their thing and like not proselytizing, cool, but of course they are proselytizing. Of course they are out there on the streets and they are trying to convince people or convert
Yeah,
people.
I guess you're right about the quote unquote Jews for Jesus movement. I think I'm thinking about it, and you still correct me, and I'm not trying to be defensive about what I said or anything, but I think what I'm thinking about it of is in terms of like how your it being your culture in the sense that like a lot of atheists are still Jews and they participate in the traditions and it's still deeply important to them and they're deeply invested in their community and so I
It's
guess in
cultural Judaism,
that
right? Isn't that what they
that's
call it? Mhm.
I guess that's what I was thinking of it in terms of if you're not overly again evangelical about it. Like if your mission shifts to like, all right, now let me find all these Jews and try to get them onto my team, then yeah, that changes things a little bit. Um, but anyway, I didn't mean to get off too much on that. It still correct me if you think it's warranted. But my point was really only that these families, these people who were Christian and Jewish was like this is the absolute best purest form of what it is that we think this is.
Well, yeah, we were always taught that, right? Like, and it's always this sort of ambivalence about who are the chosen people, right? Like that, because of course, like Scripture itself, number. I always feel weird saying that. Like, Scripture itself says this. It's like no, our interpretation, whatever. I understand everything's an interpretation, but like a lot of Paul's writings, we're thinking about like a book of Romans, right? Where he talks about like the chosen people and he talks about like Christians being grafted in to this tree. But like Jews were and are, according to, I think, pretty reasonable readings of scripture, like God's chosen people, right? And I think that that doesn't take like, if in fact Christians, according to the evangelical or Christian imagination, they're grafted in, they're grafted in. They're not the primary sort of like plant in this, metaphor. But so often Christians see themselves as like, as God's chosen people. But then on the other side, I think to your point, Sam, where they're like, but those Jews who have converted or who are Messianic Jews or are, Jews for Jesus, they are the purest form, and they're also again venerated. They're seen as this like like a real Jew and a real Jew who loves Jesus, aka like the realest of Jews, right? Like all of this feeds back into what we're talking about, which is this crazy sort of like abstract understanding of Jews. And then based on that, like one encounter that they invite this Jew for Jesus to their church to speak on a Sunday morning, like from that encounter, they're like, see, like I know about Judaism. I remember, I can even give you like a personal anecdote. And of course, this isn't, concrete evidence, but it is certainly anecdotal evidence. And I remember when I went to Liberty, I took a few classes. One was the history of anti-Semitism. Another was Jewish American literature, Jewish literature, and it was mostly Jewish American. And then also what was affectionately called Old Testament survey, which, maybe Hebrew Bible survey, but I digress. So I take these classes. And after I left Liberty, after I was graduating, I had been accepted for my master's in English. and I was going to write on Holocaust literature. And in all my like evangelical hubris, I remember leaving there thinking, I've got this. Like, I know all there is to know about Jews. Like, I took a few classes, and maybe that's like in line with a lot of undergrads. They take one class on women and gender sexuality studies, and they're like, I'm an expert. And it's like, you're not, but okay.
Yeah.
I'm glad you took the introductory class, though, like for sure. However, I didn't really take an academic sort of approach to these topics. I took a Liberty University approach to these topics, which I like. Newsflash is not academic. Like, it's just I was wildly underprepared for when I got to grad school. So I go into grad school, and I remember my professor. I begin one of my what do you call like my seminar presentations with the phrase "the Old Testament." He pauses me, and for about 5-ish minutes, if you know how long 5 minutes is during your own presentation, which was only supposed to take about 10 minutes, about 5 minutes, he stops me and goes on about how incredibly anti-Judaic or anti-Semitic that phrase is, and goes into this long tirade about that. And then he's like, and continue. And it was like, from that moment forward, I was like, I know jack all about Jews, Judaism, and Jewish literature. Like, I accept, here we go. But I think that what happens is that Christians, again, they'll have a Jew for Jesus come to their church, or maybe they've read the Hebrew Bible, what they call the Old Testament. And afterwards, they're like, well, I know it all. Like, I know who Jews are. I know about, God's plan for these folks. Therefore, what's left to really discuss? And I think this goes into this feeds into, or is a function of, or a symptom of, how evangelicals kind of think they have the world figured out, right? Everything's right, wrong, good, evil, of the devil, of, God, whatever. And Jews are part of that. Jews are part of that imagination, and they are part of these, they are these theological pawns. They are these abstract ideas. And all of this speaks to not only how little Christians know about Jews, but what they think they do know is wildly wrong. Is that fair in saying?
It seems to be very fair. I think one thing I want to jump off on, it's probably a little tangential but relevant, that you had said about calling it the Old Testament. And one of the things that I see a lot, and that I do it sometimes too, but it's when you're making jokes about evangelicalism, right? You often harp on their literalist translations of the Bible, and then talk about like the Old Testament, and then you'll try to like rub their face in that. And it's so funny how much of that I see now, and think about how offensive that must be to Jewish people. You're like, and in the context of trying to make fun of evangelicals, I think if for the sake of comedy, I think it often lands, because you're speaking to that world, and that's the world you're trying to harp on, and their understanding
Translation.
of the world.
I'm not going to stop doing it or anything.
Look, go back like 2 weeks ago and check a meme I posted. I'm sure I'm doing it. Here I am. But I do also think about simultaneously, like, if it could be mistaken, that you're maybe making fun of just the Hebrew scriptures as a whole. And the way they understand their scriptures is so wildly different than the way evangelicals interpret those scriptures, that you're harping on two different things, or you're harping on something completely different than the way that I would say the Jewish people would understand their scripture. So I don't know, but it is weird to see a lot. I notice it a lot now, where it's just like, oh, and then God put, two of every creature on the boat, and everyone makes fun of that. And you're like, it's funny to make fun of if you think it's a real story. If it's a story for the purpose of communicating people's developing understanding of what they think it means to be a spiritual or chosen people, like, that becomes interesting and cool, and I want to learn more and hear those perspectives. But when it stops at this literalist translation is when I want to make fun of it, but then still also feel a little bad about it, because I know I'm making fun of something that is important to a group of people but understood completely differently. Does that make sense?
Yeah. And I think that for me, like, when I think about religion, I don't think I would ultimately say I don't think religion is inherently bad. I don't care what your religion is. Like, literally take your pick from any religion across history, time, space, whatever. I think some religion is like super cool, super good, and it actually does a lot of good in the world. But I think if you're any sort of religious tradition that is um, literalist in how they understand, you understand scripture, in how in conservative and how you sort of hold on to a lot of really outdated beliefs, whatever that religious tradition is. Um, it oftentimes comes with the oppression of specific groups of people,
Yeah,
right?
it's like the
I,
worst iteration of it.
right. And I immediately think of women and queers. Why? Because I'm queer and I hang out with a lot of women, right? Like, you can think of like other, again, take your pick of whichever sort of like identity category you want to talk about. If you're talking about race, ethnicity, like sex, not just gender, like so much. Um, what you oftentimes find accompanying these religious traditions is really dangerous and in some cases deadly understandings of particular groups of people, both within the community and without, right?
Mhm.
And so I mean, I as a former evangelical, I have no problem making fun of evangelicals, and I will continue to do so. Why? Because I think like humor is one way of pointing out
Yeah, yeah.
the lunacy of this religious tradition, right? Like there's so much in it that is so death dealing, that is so detrimental. And it was not just towards me, right? Like I am one of many groups who have been affected by evangelicals very negatively. Right? And I through my writing and also through my, I guess like I can't really call it comedy because it's not that funny, but you know what I mean? Like I make jokes from time to time. Sometimes they land, most of the times they don't. But whatever it is, right? Like that's a form of critique. I think humor is a form of critique. I think academia is a form of critique. I think this podcast is a form of critique, right? I and I think that it's necessary and it's good. So I think that I mean humor's a funny thing, funny. But humor's a weird thing, right? In the sense that a lot of people sort of understand it in a very like it's either good or it's bad, it's right or wrong. Again, that sort of goes in this binary understanding of the world. I think humor is a lot more complex, and humor and jokes and comedy can do a lot more than just it's not. I think sometimes we take jokes at face value, but of course there's a lot deeper meaning. Like, and again, sometimes it's problematic. There's no doubt, but sometimes it's not, and it's sort of a line we have to decide for ourselves.
Yeah, yeah. Go ahead, Casey.
So okay, so I had a question about getting back to anti-Semitism, Nazism, and the role that like Christianity played and what some of the stuff that went down. So we've talked a lot about homophobia and how Christianity, in at least in my realm, was it was like the final justification for how you already felt about gay people. You know, it was like, I don't like gay people. And oh, by the way, the Bible says that that's valid. It was kind of like the last point on a PowerPoint slide when you're trying to sell something to a group of people. And I mean, is that similar in some ways to how it fed into like the Nazi understanding of Jews and stuff? Because I know that there was a lot of, I mean, there was the hysteria about communism, and there was a lot of Zionist communist overlap and stuff like that. I know that with some of the stuff that happened after like the Versailles Treaty and things. I mean, there was a lot of things that led to that anti-Semitism, and Christianity was one of those, like you were saying. What How dominant of a factor was it?
Well, here's the thing. First thing, there were like the Nazi party as like officially was not a Christian affiliated party. This is not to say that there weren't Christians who were Nazis. In fact, there were many Christians who were Nazis, whether Catholic or Protestant. But I think sometimes people think, well, because Nazism, like they weren't promoting Christianity. It wasn't like Christianity had a role, and it's kind of like saying how a lot of Americans today aren't pro-Christian or aren't like Christians themselves, but that they aren't been affected or influenced by Christianity, right? Like those like country bumpkins who don't go to church but are still conservative. Where do they think a lot of these ideas come from, right? And so the Nazi Party itself, again, it wasn't that Christianity was the only factor. In fact, like you said, there were so many factors, right? There was this desperation after the Treaty of Versailles. for trying to find a way out of this economic depression, right? That people were literally, it was in some cases worth more to burn your money as fuel for your fires than it was to use those like the bills themselves uh, to cash in on, you know, milk or bread or whatever, right? And so that
Well,
you have
they weren't paying $4.50 a gallon, so for gas.
the
I don't
prices
want
were
Walk a
up.
while in my shoes,
I don't
Germans.
want to make light of their situation, but things are pretty tough here right now, Luke.
Stop. But you know, and then you can think about, you know, and there are people who were like wallpapering their houses with their money, right? And so
Wild.
that's one factor. Like the economic factor was huge, and there's no way of like not seeing that. There were also again, there were like, I'll put all those aside and we'll just talk about the religious aspect. Again, it wasn't like even from the Gospels there was this one sort of like easy shot from the Gospels to Auschwitz, right? Like that wasn't how it worked.
The Gospels to Auschwitz pipeline that I keep hearing about.
Right. We've all heard of it, and so I think what I would say in part is that again, even with the question of who killed Jesus, and again, a lot of evangelicals, like you're saying, Sam, I think some of them would actually say no, it was the Roman Empire. But that doesn't take away from the fact that if on the street, a lot of people aren't evangelicals, a lot of people are just, you know, whatever sort of faith confession they have, they will say Jews killed Jesus. You think about Jews as oftentimes people talk about Jews as like money hungry, and they're, you know, they're what's the word, pinching pennies. And where does that come from? I mean, if we think about Judas, who was the purse holder? Oh, right, our boy Judas. We then have, of course, like other sort of cultural documents that amplify these ideas of Jews as you know, money hungry. Of course, like the Protocols of the Elders of Zion. It was this like small little document that was written, I think, in 1905 or 1906 in Russia, then translated German, then disseminated from there. And in this, it's this idea of Jews having this global monopoly, and they're out, you know, they're controlling the banks and all this kind of stuff, right? There are so many, and then of course there are other historical factors of how Jews were associated with money, and specifically how they were forced into certain professions, i.e., banking, because Christians weren't allowed to lend on interest, and Jews didn't see a problem with that. And then once they became, you know, associated with that, then of course they were associated with money and et cetera, right? There are so many factors that play into this. But
it's like self-fulfilling. Like the anti-Semitism is what paved the way for them to get into professions that people would hate them for and continue.
It was their only route. It was the only route available to them.
Exactly.
And it's so fascinating.
And the idea of, sorry, pardon me, Casey.
Oh, I'm sorry. I think like we look at what, you know, the Holocaust under the Nazis, you know, is like that gets all of the attention when you talk about anti-Semitism, but it was kind of like one of the last in like a long line of really awful persecutions against Jews, you know, all throughout Russia and Poland and basically all Eastern Europe, like the pogroms and stuff. I feel like I didn't really hear a lot about those until the last few years. I mean, I've listened to some things on them, and horrific stuff.
And that's exactly what I was about to say. Because first of all, when I teach about the Holocaust, like the first, not quarter of the class, but the first like sixth or fifth of the class, we talk about the Christian New Testament, and students are like, "What the heck are we doing? Like, why are we reading this, or why are we talking about this when we could be talking about the Holocaust?" I'm like, if you don't understand the foundation, you're not going to understand the argument we're building throughout this class. Like, just be patient, and we'll get there. And eventually, they're always like, "Yep." But the first few weeks, it's kind of confusing, right? And so you think about like, the verse where it's, what is it? Barnabas and Jesus are standing before the crowd. Pontius Pilate, he says, "Who do you want to release?" And, you know, the crowd says, Jesus, and Pilate washes his hands, of course, you know, in this very peaceful gesture. Meanwhile, historically, Pontius Pilate was known to be incredibly violent, was actually removed from his post because of how violent he was. But in the Christian Testament, right, there are, of course, politics at play and how he was represented at the time. And so he's this gentle, meek kind of guy. He washes his hands, right? And then what does the crowd say? And of course, it doesn't just say the crowd. It says the Jews, right? It says like this like definite group. They say, "Let the blood be on our heads and our children's heads," right? So this idea of Jews as violent, Jews as not just killers, but killers of God, right? That this understanding, this violent understanding of Jews as violent people, of course, trickles down. We see, Casey, to your point, this idea of how throughout Christian history, and yes, it is Christian history because these are the folks who were in charge, right? How Jews were framed for so many things. We think about the blood libel, right? That there was this story of how Jews got this little kid, killed him, and used his blood for matzah, right? This violent understanding of Jews as violent people. And so
you don't think that happened?
all that to
The
say, I don't
clarification.
think that happened. Yeah.
Okay. All right, I'm tracking.
Yeah. So the blood libel, right? And you can think about, so many different instances after that throughout Christian history of how Jews have been framed because of how they were framed originally, right? And then, of course, the early church fathers, if you read the stuff that these folks said, like, you're like, oh my gosh, like, it is absolutely bonkers to read like how they talked about Jews again. And where did their understandings of Jews come from and Judaism come from? It comes from the scriptures themselves, right? Like, they're not getting this out of thin air. They're getting this from the scriptures. And if we even think about the scriptures and why is it that the scriptures are so anti-Jewish? At the time, Christians and Jews were parting ways. It's called the parting of the ways in this field of study. And how one group was trying to self-define in contradistinction to the other group. And Jews were trying to define themselves, and Christians not really, kind of, they were more so like, just like, okay, you go offshoot of whoever you are, go do your thing. Like, we don't really care about you too much. But Christians, being the younger sibling in this case, if you think about sibling rivalry, right? They're trying to like define themselves over and against their bigger brother, bigger, sister. And they're going to use some really colorful language to define them, and also then in turn to define themselves. That's one factor. Again, there's also just the other factors of like, there are a number of other factors. All this to say that the reason why we have such violent understandings of Jews in Christian history, and again, it starts with the early church fathers up until Martin Luther and beyond, is because of the scriptures themselves and how they were framing Jews. And so when we get up to Hitler, right, Hitler wasn't a religious man himself, right? And in fact, he was very much against religion. But what happens is, by the time we get to the Holocaust, and by the time we get to, when Hitler writes Mein Kampf in 1925, when he's in prison and he's talking about Jews and he's using all these different references to Jews as X, Y, and Z, or if we're in America, Z, right? He's using all these different he's drawing upon these caches of anti-Semitic tropes that we're finding that again found their genesis in scripture. And so it's not that we find this like easy, oh, this is how this leads to this. History is not like that in a lot of cases, maybe in some cases, but by and large, it's not. It's sort of this cultural consciousness, this cultural imagination that's seeped in Christian anti-Semitism that ultimately is bleeds throughout history, throughout time, up until the Nazi Party is formed. And then when the Nazi Party is formed, these ideas were they found such fertile ground, among other reasons, right? Again, Jews were scapegoated for the loss of World War I. And there's this, I can think of this one specific cartoon from Der Stürmer, which Der Stürmer was this this anti-Semitic propaganda magazine, and it has this picture of this like German soldier, at the line, at the line. You can tell how much I know about fighting and combat at the line, right? And you have this Jewish, presumably Jewish creature, or presumably like this, like, what do you say? It's very like creature-esque, right? Like, you see that this person's like unsexed or like both sexed or one, and it's like boobs, but also has like very manly feature, and you can't really tell. And so it's this like creature-like figure, but again, it's trying to represent Jews, or frame them in a certain way. And it says that the war, like the wound, or essentially like the loss didn't come from without, it came from within. And there's this Jewish creature person with this like knife behind this German soldier's back, right? So they were being scapegoated even right after the the end of World War I. So there's so many different sort of factors that are playing into this. But again, all these different factors and all these different anti-Semitic influences were shaped, formed, and ultimately catalyzed by Christian theology and Christian scriptures themselves.
I think one of the things that's interesting to extrapolate from the New Testament and talking about how that, because there's no, I feel like when you talk about how much of it gave way to anti-Semitism, there's a certain amount of people who want to be apologists for it, right? And in that they'll say, okay, well, that's not really the way that these people extrapolated the information from it, or the way they understood it wasn't what the intent was of the writers or the authors. I think in a lot of ways we know that impact is worse than intent, but a lot of things have been written across a lot of generations. And so when you look at the anti-Semitism that is extrapolated from the New Testament, even within it, like within Paul's writing, you see that that debate is contrasted within about whether or not they should that talk about circumcision, right? Huge thing. Do Christians need to be circumcised like the Jewish people? Do they not? Like this? I mean, there's always this back and forth about how much you need to graft into the Jewish identity, or how much of it you're going to branch off and do something different. And there's actually, you'll see the real animosity there sometimes. I'm blanking on the names, but it's like there are two people who are arguing about it, and they just like decide to go their separate ways because they can't come to terms with whether or not they just can't agree on whether or not you should maybe like not eat shellfish or hold to certain traditions. And I don't know, I just think that's really interesting that debate is captured within the Christian New Testament. And I think I want to make a parallel, and I want you to tell me what you think of it. In the way that people extrapolate from the culture or use language to get culture to do what they want. And that there's always going to be language to get culture to do what you want or to entice it into a certain direction. So think about like all we know now. It seems pretty common knowledge for a lot of people at this point, but the moral majority and the way that they used abortion, right, to really launch their culture war. And it's like we always had, there was that debate within Catholicism, but because that was Catholic and it wasn't evangelical or Protestant, it was like they didn't really care about it. But then there became this shift. There was some shifts happening, and they realized at one point, the moral majority realized at one point, this needs to be what we take. They didn't really care about it personally, but if they took that as their linchpin, they were able to get enough of the culture on board to push a voting block where they needed
It's
to
useful as a vehicle.
Yeah. So I guess what I'm thinking about is useful as a vehicle, like Casey said. Like, so Hitler, anti-Semitism, useful as a vehicle, use religious language, steal some of Martin Luther's speeches and use those and rally the troops against him. And then it's like, if I feel like humanity is so fucking flawed that if you push past all of that and you decide that we'll never ever speak of Christianity again, that they'll just find that there'll be something new to graft, to pull people onto their side to do fucked up stuff. And that's not to be an excuse and to say that means using Christianity poorly, that you just get off the hook. I'm just saying that it does feel like in a lot of ways we're destined to repeat this with new language if the language shifts from this old religious language to maybe something new. What do you make of that? And from your studies and the way that you see people weaponize popular culture or religion to get people to do what they want.
Yeah. I mean, before I had said that I don't think religion is inherently bad always. And again, I stand by that statement. And I would ultimately say like that statement is accurate for a very small fraction of like religion. I really don't think, I think a lot of religion really has a lot of issues. I should say, but, and this might sound like I'm contradicting that, but I'm not, because again, I wouldn't include Christianity as part of that small group. Christianity in and of itself is not inherently benign or good even, right? Like I think oftentimes people say like, oh, it's a perversion of religion or perversion of Christianity. That's presupposing the idea that Christianity at its core is good. It's not. Christianity at its core, if we are to understand Jesus's Great Commission, which is pretty central to what it means to be a Christian, right? To go out and proselytize, to go out and convert people. That is a colonizing mission. Like that is something where you're saying, I know better than all y'all, and I'm going to make sure that you fall under the rubric that I've really in a lot of ways created myself, straight white men, right? That we've created this rubric of what it means to be a Christian. If you don't align with that, then you're either other, you're outcast, you're gross, you're dirty. Think about queers. We're always described as very gross and dirty, right? You can think about, whatever, right? The people are framed in a certain way if in fact they don't subscribe to that. That is not an inherently benign or good way of thinking, right? So first and foremost, I do want to say that I don't think that that Christianity was perverted during the time of Nazis, or it was perverted now. No, I think it was always quite bad, and it was used in a way that justified certain moves and certain movements and certain ways of thinking. And I think that today you find something. And I'm not trying to say that in America it's the same as the 1930s. I'm not saying that. And people who oftentimes make these trite comparisons between the Holocaust in America or
so
whatever.
Annoying.
It's like you're really just not reading the books. I don't think the way that you should be reading these books, or again, like maybe your critical thinking or your ability to make strong or solid comparisons is a little off. Anyway, however, that's not to say that there aren't parallels. There are certain things that history doesn't repeat, but it does rhyme, according to Mark Twain, right? And so we see some things, we see some continuities, and I think, Sam, what you're saying is the idea that Christianity is being mobilized again. Again, it's not that Hitler, even though he wasn't a religious man, was saying church shouldn't happen. He was very down for it. Why? Because he knew that pastors were out there actively preaching against Jews. Today, I don't think a lot of pastors, I mean, there are some, we can see some of those, just like those nutcases in these like fundamental, what do they call them? What is it? Fundamental Baptist, I forget the exact.
Yeah.
Fundamentalist,
like fundamentalist Baptists and stuff like that.
Yeah, that those folks. I would only assume that they are railing on Jews today, and it's like, okay. But what I would say is that Christianity is being mobilized, particularly right now during a time of Christian nationalism and Christian exception. Well, it's always been Christian exceptionalism. That's always that sort of definition of Christianity, right? They are the exception. They are the ones who are right. And I think it's being used in a way that isn't being perverted or isn't perverting the original religious tradition. It's actually very much using it for what it's been used throughout history, which is to exert power, right? And we can see these different expressions of power throughout history and these different moments when Christianity was used to control populations. It's still being used to control populations, right? And Sam, you had said before that abortion was sort of the beginning of the religious, the moral majority. And in fact, what I should say is that if we understand Randall Balmer, he's a historian from Dartmouth. He's just a dream. He's such a good guy, and he does great work. He actually makes the argument that abortion wasn't the first issue that evangelicals used. It was actually race. And there actually are some connections to Liberty University in his book, but again, I neither here nor there. Those don't matter for now. What does matter is that they were terrified of integration of schools, right? They didn't want black kids and with their white kids in the classroom. And so they started at this time creating all these Christian academies. And then, of course, these different Christian universities started popping up more and more. Again, there were some before, there's no doubt. Like there were some older Christian schools in the country. A lot of the Ivy League were Christian schools, blah, blah, blah. But these like very particular evangelical religious institutions, whether they be middle or elementary, middle, high, or beyond institutions, these all started popping up. And it was actually the moral majority first said that they really like the issue was race, and they wanted to find a way so that as not to mix with black folks specifically. And so in that case as well, right, they were using very popular ideas both within the greater culture as well as within the evangelical culture specifically. They were using these ideas and they were mobilizing religion to rally the troops, right? And they were using this in a way that was politically helpful. Why? Because Jerry Falwell, as well as the other, founders of the moral majority, saw what Martin Luther King Jr. was doing with black folks and how he was allowing or creating sort of a political awareness and actually mobilizing people to vote and using the pulpit in some cases and also just church spaces in general, and also getting pastors to be involved to actually make some political change, right? And that was obviously wildly effective in a number of senses, of course. But then Falwell saw this and was like, let's do the same. And again, Falwell and his cronies, they all did it together. All this to say is that I think that we do see similarities. Again, it's not that history is repeating itself, but it certainly is rhyming right now.
I wonder how much of some of that is amplified by the fact that, like, in the US at least, like, our constitutional freedom to worship and stuff has made religion like one untouchable sphere for political movements and stuff like that. Like, I wonder how often it's commandeered for that specific purpose, whether it's like knowingly or unknowingly. It's like, if you come at this issue, which we all have feelings about already, if you come at this from a religious standpoint, it's you can't really touch this because it's part of my religion. Hey, look, this is my religious doctrine and heritage, and because of that, like, you really can't touch that. Because, I mean, you see the same thing now with discrimination against gay people. I mean, you know it's against my religion to serve a gay couple a pizza or whatever. Like, does religion really play that much of a factor in what you're talking about and why you think that way? Or is that just the most convenient way out of this pickle you find yourself in, where it's hard to
That's
legally be a bigot?
that's exactly it. Like when my mom found out I was gay, all of a sudden she became very religious. And I was like, Cheryl, look at this conversion moment you're having. Like, where is all this religious rhetoric coming from? Oh, right. It lends itself very well to excluding and discriminating and, ultimately like speaking against your own son.
Cheryl's been getting
And
deep in the word, y'all.
she's been doing her devos. Cheryl, and again, like I think that experience in and of itself just showed me how much religious rhetoric or the scriptures themselves, how they can be used as such a force for division, right? They can be used in such a way that they're used very divisively, right? And I think that really, like, you can't. I think, Casey, that's exactly the point. Like, so often nowadays, it's not about being faithful to the word, whatever that even means. But I think in some senses we do kind of know what folks are trying to say when they say that. But at the same time, not. But all this to say is that for a lot of today, I don't think a lot of people are really trying to follow Jesus as much as they are trying to um, fall within what they understand to be a Christian, which is no longer really just defined by like the Bible and a personal relationship with Jesus, which for a long time, I think that was sort of the goal. It's now anti-gay, pro-Trump, anti-Muslim, all these sort of
Yeah.
things. And I think that's why I always tell my students when we're reading, when we are discussing the Holocaust, they want those sort of American parallels. And of course, I'm going to give them to them, or a Canadian when I teach here. I say to them, we can't understand American politics if we don't understand American religion, specifically Christianity, and even more specifically evangelicalism in our cultural or sort of historical moment right now. Right? That anyone who tries to talk about American politics, I love it when Canadians try to talk about American politics but know nothing about theology. I'm like, my friends, you honestly know so little. Like, you can't talk about these things unless you understand Christian theology, right? So much of what is spewed these days finds its genesis, like we were saying, with like how anti-Semitism finds its genesis in the scriptures. So much of like sort of like discriminatory rhetoric finds its genesis where? In the scriptures, right? I think what we're seeing throughout this conversation is that there are so many parallels to be drawn, again, so many differences as well. And those differences need to be recognized and honored. But what we can see is that scripture and Christian theology lend themselves so well to dominating and exerting power over other communities. And in some cases to what you would say is maybe the logical end, which is their demise, right? If Christians had their way, queers wouldn't exist, right? Like they literally want us to be gone. I think we've talked about this before. That's a genocidal intention, right? During the Holocaust, Hitler wanted Jews gone. And again, a lot of Christians wanted Jews gone, right? Like they wanted to exterminate, which of course is a word we use for, pests or bugs. They wanted them gone. And I think that what we see even today, I can think about, there was this one pastor, I forget which country, it was where was it? It was somewhere in Africa. I don't know which specific country. He talked about the queer community as like pests or bugs or insects or whatever. Pest was the word, and how they needed to be exterminated. Right? We see these parallels. We see these connections, and it just shows us how powerful Christian theology and Christian scripture and the interpretation of Christian scriptures can be.
To rationalize belief. I think that's what's so challenging for. So one of the, I mean, these conversations like this are always like challenge to me, because I've mentioned before, everyone who listens knows, I still find myself like wanting to. I still like kind of consider myself Christian in the way that I've allowed certain like the good parts of it that you've talked about to impact my life. And then so we recently had Brian McLaren on, and I don't know if you're familiar with Brian McLaren, but great guy. His new book is Do I Stay Christian? And it's a lot of really good reasons why you shouldn't, and then some reasons why if you choose to, you can do it well. And it's just like for people who feel stuck, like you can leave this. You don't have to do this anymore, and you can still be the kind of person that you think you're supposed to be within Christianity. And if you want to be that person, you can also do that within Christianity. And I've thought about him a lot in the conversation we had in the I was able to skim his book before we talked, but it was like it feels like the parts of Jesus that are compelling to people are the parts of what would almost say at this point, given the net negative of Christianity throughout history, when you look at its empiricism and how much it's just been about usurping power and dominance and land and control, it's like it feels like what if those good parts that you love are impacting you, it feels like also note that Jesus wasn't a Christian. It feels like the most Christian thing to do, the most Jesus thing to do would be to just give to move on from any language that is being used to harm and hurt and control and dominate in an empirical sense. And I say that right now, I struggle with saying that because I still feel like so my identity is rooted in that, and it feels it's almost embarrassing for me to even say it because I know what that means and how much time I feel like I would have to spend explaining myself afterwards. But it does, like, but talking to you and other people who have been so directly harmed by it, like, it's so much easier for me to not feel that way because I haven't had the direct harm, and I've benefited from the harm that it's caused in a lot of ways. And I don't know, but no conclusion here. That was just kind of the end of my tangent.
I think, like, so Christianity is what we're all close to because that's what we know the best, right? It's the screechiest nail on the chalkboard currently in the US and a lot of other places, right? But I think sometimes what gets lost in this discussion, especially within like the deconstruction realm, is that there's a lot of ideologies that have done these exact same things. What's funny, and it's, I don't know, it's another weird one to talk about because of the modern day connotations of it. But you go back and you look at like communism in the past like 150 years, and I don't think communism as a theory or as an idea or whatever is necessarily negative or bad or anything like that, but it's been used to like totally dominate and wipe out cultures all over the world, and it's led to a lot, and in a way, when you look at how it was practiced and professed, it was more of a religion than a political system or anything like that. But I think that kind of speaks to the point of what we're talking about, is that like people rationalize what they want to do already using the language that's going to be what's the most effective vehicle to get to push the point that I want to push. And in a lot of cases in the past 150 years here, it's been Christianity. But that same rhetoric has been used against all sorts of different groups and stuff like that in other countries in the aside from Christianity. There's a really interesting like short Vice documentary that you can watch on YouTube about the rise of Hindu nationalism in India, and it's weird. You should go watch it because it makes you feel really uncomfortable. You look at the way that religion and ideology is being used by people who want to rationalize harm to others, and they're using that ideology to do exactly that apart from Christianity. But the parallels are scary.
Mhm.
And the way that
that they're weaponizing their religion against like uh, Buddhists and Muslims within India is it's it's rough. It's
Mhm.
rough. It's stuff that, I mean, this happens with every ideology. I think like people use it to their own ends. It's just a matter of like, well, you know what's left to salvage after that type of history. Like, and I think that's kind of a personal thing. Is there enough good left there for you to stick with it? Does it make sense to keep it? Or, if you really feel strongly about the harm that was caused, maybe it is a net negative. Maybe you should ditch it. I don't know. I think that's something that people have to decide for themselves.
Well, one thing you said there, Casey, was how communism becomes almost a religion in of itself. And I think that sort of like asks or begs the question, like, what is religion then? Right? Is and like how do we define religion? And if it's fun because like you can have an entire like semester or year long course on like the question can be like what is religion and you're never going to find an answer, right?
Yeah.
And I think that maybe ideology is the word to use here because if you think about it, like again, like what does it mean to be religious, or like is it a perversion of religion? And if it's a perversion of religion, is it still religion? No, it's not anymore. It's something else. And it's like all of what we're talking about is really just like politics in different senses. And when you think about politics, the idea of like where the people are and like controlling those people, right? And like this like very Foucauldian sort of like understanding of power and how power sort of operates and how it sort of like is expressed and exerted and whatever. um Really like religion, like you were saying before, and I think you were talking about this today, say like same your question before. It's like how is religion being used to control the masses? How is religion being used to control specifically the American people, right? And all of this is like, what is religion? Are these Christian nationalist Christians? Are they just like political crazies looking for some sort of control because they're terrified of a changing and shifting you know uh, landscape that's surrounding them, right? There's so many like really like, are they real Christians? Are they pretend Christians? Like what all these questions, all this points back to how, you know, at this point religion, and this isn't like Casey to your point, like it's not just a Western thing. This in the East, we can see this. You're saying like the Hindu nationalists and whatnot. All across the world, we're just seeing how religion's being used in a way that's supporting what folks want to do or how they want to live their lives, and ultimately how they want their neighbors to live their lives, even though their neighbors don't necessarily, or pardon me, don't in any way agree, right? And there's some sort of desire for like you know everyone agreeing or sort of being all on the same page. And of course that's not the world. Like that's what liberalism is at its core, is the idea that we can all coexist in a very in the same space, but ultimately be allowed to be very different, and because we are ultimately very different as people. And so I think that all of this really just points to religion as politics, politics as religion, and it's terrifying in some cases, particularly right now in the States.
Yeah. God damn, I feel like that sums that up so good.
God has a plan. Okay.
Yeah.
You
That's what you're
know?
In the
trying to
words
say,
of
right?
Drake, yeah, Drake's our modern day prophet, God's plan.
That all things work together for the good of those who love God is what you're saying. I got you.
That's it.
Perfect.
All that to say. And then we have, of course, our modern day theologian Ariana Grande, but that's a different story. Sorry, I interrupted.
No, you didn't. Uh, I don't. We have a little bit of time left. If you can hang with us for a minute, because I am curious about. You just recently defended your doctoral dissertation.
I did.
And that sounds terrifying to me because I don't like even doing a group presentation in grad school right now. So I I don't I'm just curious as to what that was. What was your thesis, and then what's that process of defending it? Let's finish with that.
Yeah. So my dissertation was on the transmission of trauma between Holocaust survivors and their children, and then the very last chapter was a little bit about their grandchildren. But it was more,
Fascinating.
yeah. And so I looked at really like my whole argument was, and ultimately, and this can actually be done for anyone. I love like right now, like I'm looking at the screen and I can see your guys' backgrounds, and my whole dissertation was really like reading quote unquote people's houses, like looking at the house and then talking about how that house transmitted trauma in and of itself, like how that house, like the way that they expressed themselves, the way they decorated, the way they controlled movement, the way that certain children had to have their doors open at all times because their parents were terrified their kids were going to get stolen in the middle of the night, right? How there'd be a packed suitcase. What does that communicate? Oh, we're ready to flee at any point, right? All these different things of how homes were decorated, arranged, organized, and navigated, how all of this was an indirect expression of Holocaust trauma, and then how that then traumatized the children to the point where some children imagined, their houses being concentration camps or gas chambers or ghettos or places of hiding, right? So they'd look at their shower head and they'd say, I don't want Zyklon B coming out of this. I don't want to be gassed to death, right? And,
wow.
they'd be terrified of confined spaces because of cattle cars or things like this. They wouldn't go on subways, whatever. Of course, the subways aren't domestic, but whatever. So I looked at the way that children of Holocaust survivors described their homes, I argued was an indirect expression of how they related to the Holocaust. So to give you a quick example, I did not just, I studied literature and oral history. There was this one woman, I said to her, can you describe your childhood home? She was a child of Holocaust, a child of a Holocaust survivor. And she said, sure. She's like, yeah, when I was a kid, my parents were around a lot, and we would normally go out, my siblings and I would go outside. We'd play until the lights were, the street lights were on. We had a lot of friends outside. We'd go to the beach, blah, blah, blah. And I said, okay, well, sorry, can you describe your childhood home? And she's like, yeah, my parents, we'd go on a lot of vacations. We'd go to Florida. We'd go to Pennsylvania. And I'm sitting there, I'm like, ma'am, you're not describing your home. You're talking about everything outside your home. And she wouldn't answer the questions. And finally I said to her, I was like, hey, I'm not sure if you've noticed, but when I ask you to describe your home, you're not really describing it. And she's like, that's funny. And then she went on again, not to describe her home. So throughout the other parts of the interview, she was talking about how she had what her parents called her problem. Her problem were these panic attacks she'd have as a kid, and she would literally just start booking it. She'd start running. And so, she would just say that she'd be on the side of driving on the highway, and all of a sudden she'd have this panic attack coming on, her quote unquote problem. She'd get out of her car, park it, and just start running down the side of the highway, freaking out. This is in college and this kind of stuff. And wow. She said she always was constantly trying to avoid the Holocaust. She didn't want to talk about the Holocaust. Her mom talked about it a lot. She didn't want to hear about it. She wanted to avoid it. So she kept avoiding it throughout her entire life. So then when I'm sitting there, I'm listening to these three sort of moments, right? She's not describing her home. She has these running moments whenever her problem, quote unquote, comes out, which if her problem was just an expression of her inherited trauma from her mom's Holocaust experiences. And she even identified it as that as well. And then on top of that, not wanting to talk about the Holocaust throughout her life. I said to her at one point, I said, do you think that you're running, you were physically running? I said, but you were also figuratively running from the Holocaust, just like you're running from talking about the Holocaust throughout your life. And on top of that, when I asked you to describe your home, which of course the home itself is a nexus of your relationship with your parents. It's a very space that sort of frames your understanding of the world in a lot of ways. It's the first cosmos for you in some senses. I said all of these things are connected. And it was that interview that really sort of crystallized this idea for me that she was avoiding talking about her home. She was avoiding talking about the Holocaust. She was running from the Holocaust. She was running from her trauma, right? All these things sort of revealed themselves in a way that I saw these connections across these three different points. And then that ultimately framed how I understood a lot of the literature and then other oral histories of children of survivors. But that's what I studied. That's what I was working on for the past 3.5 years. And
so was that just a lot of interviews? You do a lot of interviews with?
I think I did 8 in total, but I also used a lot of interviews that were already done. So I went to the New York Public Library on a fellowship. I went to the University of Hartford on a fellowship. And then I conducted my own at the College of Charleston. I wasn't at the College of Charleston. I was just there on a fellowship as well, doing these oral histories. And so the scariest part of the entire process was certainly not writing it. In fact, writing it was my favorite part of all of it. It was, Sam, to your point, the defense. What the heck is the defense? And my supervisor, he's one of the coolest people I've ever met in my life. I could start crying talking about how much I love him. And I cried a lot writing my acknowledgement section to him. I couldn't stop crying, and I kept rereading it and crying because I love this man so much. So the week before the defense, he keeps calling me, right? He's I think he's 85 or 86. He keeps calling me and saying, the defense. And I'm like, yeah, Dr. Berger, you want to give me a little bit of insight and to what to expect? He's like, oh, no, you're fine. And I'm like, what?
Am I?
I'm like, no, but what should I be expecting? I said, no one's really told me anything or really even what to prepare. And he's like, oh, it's going to be good. And like he literally like every time for the entire week, and he kept calling me too. And I kept like saying like, "Is this a practical joke? Are you doing this just to like screw with me?" And he wouldn't tell me what was going to happen. So I was like, okay, then I'm just going to do what I saw my one friend do during his defense. And so I just made like an outline of what I did. I talked about changes I made to the dissertation, and then ultimately like what I plan to do in the future and that kind of stuff. So I did that for the first like 20 minutes. And I was like extending it as long as I could because I just wanted to take up as much time because I didn't want to do the rest of the defense. But the rest of the defense is where they can ask you literally anything. They can be like, Luke, on page 6, you wrote this. What do you mean by this word? And how does that relate to this overall argument? And how does this connect to this? It was something completely different. And really what a lot of academics do is they read your work or they listen to you talk. And then they're like, how does that relate to my work? And it's like, like, it's not, I don't know. Like,
Of course.
A lot of academics are
what?
narcissists.
Right. Truly are. But no, my committee was just phenomenal. Like they were so good. They asked me a few questions. Some made some comments, and then were like, "How do you respond to that?" It was really just like a conversation about the work that I had been doing. Because the beautiful part about it was that they had all read it before, more than once. They had all read the individual chapters when I would submit them to them, and they would give me their edits or their suggestions and whatnot. And then they ultimately, well, I think they reread it before the defense. I don't know. They probably didn't. Maybe they did, maybe they didn't. And they just asked me questions, and then at one point they like kicked us all out of the room, the Zoom room, because this was done online. I didn't want to fly down to Florida again. And so then they invited me back, and they said like, "Congratulations, Dr. Wilson," and I'm like, and then I started
That's
crying.
amazing, dude. That must have felt so good.
It's weird, right? Because like I still think of, gosh, like it's like not. I don't feel like an imposter. You know, people talk about the imposter syndrome. I don't feel like an imposter. I'm like, no, I know my stuff, and I enjoy this topic, and I enjoy talking, to the people that I study, and I enjoy reading the literature that I read. Of course, it's incredibly sobering, incredibly tough to do at times emotionally. But I'm fascinated by the people I study. I'm fascinated by the topic. And so it wasn't imposter syndrome. It's just like in a bigger picture. I'm like, I'm still like Luke Wilson from like the beaches, like the neighborhood I grew up in. Like, I'm that like adult toddler. Like who allowed this, But I know it's quite neat. It's weird. My supervisor said, Luke, if I can teach you anything, it's that when you make a dinner reservation from this point forward, you tell them that Dr. Wilson made the reservation. I'm like, all right. So that's all I learned. All that to say.
That's so good, dude. I'm so happy for you. Since getting to know you through doing this, you're one of my favorite people, and to know that, like, to see you, like, I just watch it, like, on Facebook and Instagram, all your posts about doing this or that, submitting this chapter, that chapter. It's just like, I don't know. I feel like I've been able to watch you play the journey out, and then we've been able to talk to you a few times here and there through it. And God, I'm just so happy for you.
Thank you. I'm pumped because my work in Holocaust studies, like I'm not over, it's not done. Like I was working on an article today. But my next project, which of course, this is how we really connected in the first place. It relates to liberty. Like I'm writing a project on liberty that will hopefully be done within the 2 years that I have to write it. And that begins September 1st. And I cannot wait to begin that. And I should also say that there's a chance, if everything goes according to plan, I have another like small article coming out about liberty soonish, and it's about their conversion therapist and some of the things that he's been doing that he probably shouldn't have been doing. But that's I don't want to give away the details just yet. But that's what I'll give a teaser for what might be coming up next through a certain online queer publication.
Ooh, is this the
spicy.
conversion therapist that we talked about originally?
Yeah, that sweetheart, Dane Emmerich.
Beautiful man.
What a great guy. Okay, here, hypothetical scenario. Okay. Liberty in a lot of hot water. You put out a couple more articles talking about your experience there and critiques and things like that. You get a call from Liberty, and they're like, Luke, we want you to be on the board of directors. Would you take it?
I would say, tell me where to sign.
You can tell them, you can set the record straight on a whole bunch of shit. What if they said, we're going to give you the university? It's yours now.
Yeah, imagine that. I'm like, just kidding, everyone. What I was saying for the past 5 years, it was all according to this plan, God's plan, of course. I'm going back. Imagine that. What a plot twist that
Dude,
would be.
you would have such a good reconversion story. You could sell that
Oh my God.
everywhere. You'd be on Joel Osteen. You'd be all over the
Oprah,
place.
dude, you get fucking Oprah with that shit.
Yeah.
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 That's called selling out, but there's no God, and
So
we're all
much
going to be
money.
dirt someday, and so get your money.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Could you imagine? What could you imagine, eh? Like oh my gosh, I've thought about like, what if they were to like ever, I don't think they will contact me. But if, what if they ever were to contact me and say like, hey, Luke, we would actually like to fly you down and like, we want to have a conversation or we want to have like a debate or whatever. Again, I don't think they would do that. And B, I'd be like, are they going to like fly me down and then like crash that
Yeah,
plane? Like
beat the shit out of you, break your fucking legs.
Yeah, never, exactly, like cut my tongue out of my throat. I don't know. I just think to myself like if they like, yeah, would that ever happen? No, I don't think it would happen. But could you imagine though? Yeah, all of a sudden I'm like, just kidding, I'm one of them.
Like on one condition, I want you to name one of the the ski runs on the snowplex, like Dr. Luke Wilson Memorial Black Diamond or something like that.
Yeah, the guy who has zero athletic ability. I want you to name an entire ski slope after the guy with no athletic ability, specifically when it comes to winter sports. Yeah,
it's just money, and that's what they have in abundance.
They have plenty of that. We know that for a fact.
And shame. Do they have shame? I don't think
No.
they do. They certainly don't have dignity, but that's another story.
Well, I can't wait to see what those projects are. Is that now that you have your doctorate, like what's your outside of working on these? Is that what is next? Working on these projects? Do you have other academic endeavors? What's next?
Yeah, so
Mr.
I
Dr.
am
Luke Wilson.
Mr. Dr. Luke Wilson. I am the incoming Justice, Equity, and Transformation postdoctoral fellow at University of Calgary, which
Sounds
is
important.
a way of
I don't know what it means.
Makes me feel a lot more important than I am. No, what that ultimately means is that I will be researching for the next 2 years for the University of Calgary, and thankfully, and I'm like unbelievably indebted to this institution. I think they're just phenomenal. I get to choose my research, and my research is
That's amazing.
On liberty. So
Okay.
Nice.
Oh my God. That's all, dude. Everything's coming together for you, man. That's so fucking sick.
yeah, I'm excited. I'm very
Good
excited.
for you, man. Well,
Thank
Luke,
you.
thanks so much for hanging out with us again. It's gonna happen again too. We're gonna bother you about stuff for the rest of your life now. So
I will see you guys next Wednesday. I can't wait.
Where's the best place for people to follow your work?
So my Instagram is at Luke Slam Dunk Wilson, and my Twitter is at Wilson_FW. I think I always forget my Twitter. But let me just double check. Hold the phone.
Yeah,
Goodness
we'll
gracious
post
me.
it in the
you're
episode
literally
notes.
holding your phone right now. So
It was exactly as I said. That's all that to say.
All right, everybody. We'll follow Luke on Instagram and Twitter. If you need the address, they'll be in the episode description, and we will see you next time.